I spent 40 years mopping floors so my son could wear Italian suits. I ate canned tuna so he could eat steak. I walked to work in the rain so he could drive a luxury car. But when he grew up, he did not see a father who sacrificed. He saw a janitor who embarrassed him. For years, he and his wife treated me like a charity case, mocking my rusted truck and my small rental home. They invited me to their lavish charity gala this weekend, not as a guest, but to hand me a toilet brush. They told me I could work in the coat check room to earn my keep. They did not know that the venue they rented for $100,000 a night, the magnificent hilltop estate they were bragging about, belonged to me. And tonight the janitor is about to hand them the bill. Before I tell you how I humbled my arrogant family, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to build your empire in silence while everyone else slept. My name is Bernard Freeman, and at 71 years old, I have learned that silence is the loudest sound in the world. I was kneeling in the dirt of my small backyard garden, pulling weeds from around my prize-winning tomato plants. The soil was cool and dark against my fingers. It was honest work, the kind of work my son Terrence never understood. Terrence sees dirt as something to be wiped away. I see it as the place where growth happens. I live in a small 2-bedroom rental on the south side of town. The paint is peeling on the porch, and the screen door squeaks when the wind blows. To the outside world, I am just Bernie, the retired janitor who drives a 1990 Ford pickup truck that sounds like a dying tractor. To my neighbors, I am the old man who shares his vegetables and fixes their fences. They do not know about the portfolio. They do not know that in 1980, when I was sweeping the floors at a small startup computer company in California, I took my bonuses in stock options instead of cash. They do not know that those options split and grew and split again until I was sitting on a mountain of wealth that could buy this entire city block 10 times over. I heard the car before I saw it. It was the low, aggressive hum of a German engine. A silver Mercedes-Benz turned into my gravel driveway, the tires crunching loudly, kicking up dust onto my hydrangeas. It was my son Terrence and his wife Brittany. I did not stand up immediately. I wiped my hands on my overalls and watched them. The car door opened and Brittany stepped out. She was wearing a white dress that looked like it cost more than my truck. She looked at the ground with disgust, tiptoeing around a small puddle of water from the hose. Terrence got out of the driver's side. He was wearing a navy blue suit, his sunglasses reflecting the afternoon sun. He looked polished, handsome, and completely hollow. Dad, Terrence called out, not moving from the safety of the driveway. "Are you going to come here, or do I have to walk through that mud?" I stood up, my knees cracking slightly with age. I walked over to the fence, leaning on the wooden post. "Hello, Terrence." "Hello, Brittany," I said, my voice calm. "I was just tending to the garden. You two are welcome to come inside." I made iced tea. Brittany wrinkled her nose, acting as if she had smelled something rotting. "Oh no, Bernard," she said, her voice high and fake. "We cannot come in. We have a dinner reservation at Le Monde in an hour, and I cannot risk getting this dust on my dress. Besides, your house always smells like boiled cabbage. It smelled like pot roast and hard work." But I did not correct her. "We are in a rush, Dad," Terrence said, checking his gold watch. "We came to offer you an opportunity." "An opportunity?" I asked. Terrence reached into the back seat of the Mercedes. He pulled out a bundle of gray fabric wrapped in plastic. He tossed it over the fence. It landed in the dirt at my feet. I looked down. It was a uniform, a cheap polyester vest and a pair of oversized gray slacks, the kind of uniform service staff wear when they are meant to be invisible. "What is this?" I asked. "It is for this weekend," Terrence said, adjusting his cuffs. "Brittany and I are hosting the Sapphire Gala. It is the biggest charity event of the year. All the movers and shakers will be there. Tech moguls, real estate tycoons, the mayor. It is huge for my career, Dad." "That sounds wonderful, son," I said, genuinely happy for him. "But what is the uniform for?" Terrence sighed, the impatience clear in his voice. "We are short-staffed. Dad." The catering company canceled 2 of their bathroom attendants. "We need someone to man the VIP restrooms. You know, hand out towels, keep the sinks dry, make sure nobody gets sick on the marble floors." I stared at him. My son, my flesh and blood. He drove across town, not to invite me to see his success, but to ask me to clean up after his guests. "You want me to clean the bathrooms?" I asked slowly. "It pays $15 an hour," Brittany chimed in, stepping forward. "And you get to keep the tips. Some of those rich guys. Tip really well, Bernard. You could make a couple $100 in one night. It would help you fix that truck of yours. Or maybe buy some new clothes. She looked me up and down, her eyes lingering on my stained overalls with a sneer. Plus, Terrence added, it keeps you busy. We cannot have you wandering around the party mingling with the guests. Dad? No offense, but you do not exactly fit the vibe. We are trying to project an image of generational wealth and success. You know how it is. I knew exactly how it was. They were ashamed of me. They were ashamed of the man who worked double shifts to pay for Terrence's private school. They were ashamed of the hands that were rough from labor, so theirs could be soft for signing checks. I looked at the bundle of clothes in the dirt. I could have been angry. I could have told them right then and there that I could buy and sell them both before breakfast. But I learned a long time ago that anger is a waste of energy and revenge is a dish best served cold. Where is this gala being held? I asked, bending down to pick up the uniform, brushing the dirt off the plastic. Terrence puffed out his chest, a smile of arrogance spreading across his face. The Freeman Estate, he said. I froze. The Freeman Estate. Yeah, Terrence continued. It is this incredible mansion up on the cliffs overlooking the city, $50 million property, massive gardens, ballroom, infinity pool. The owner is some recluse billionaire named B. Freeman. No relation, obviously just a funny coincidence. We had to pull so many strings to rent it. It cost us $100,000 for the night, but it is going to be worth it. Brittany nodded eagerly. It is breathtaking. Bernard, you have never seen anything like it. It has marble imported from Italy and chandeliers that cost more than your life. It will be a privilege for you to even see the inside of the bathrooms. I looked down at the ground to hide the smile that was fighting to appear on my lips. The Freeman Estate, my estate, the house I built 5 years ago, as a sanctuary. The house I managed through a shell company and a team of lawyers so that no one, not even my own family, knew the true owner. I visited it once a month to check on the groundskeepers, but mostly I let it sit there, accruing value, a silent monument to my success, and Terrence had rented it. He had paid my management company $100,000 to host a party in my house, and he wanted me to scrub the toilets. I looked up at them. My face was a mask of humble gratitude. The Freeman Estate, I repeated softly. That sounds very fancy. I would not want to embarrass you, Terrence. You won't, Dad, Terrence said. Just wear the uniform. Stay in the bathroom and do not tell anyone you are my father. Just say you are a temp form the agency. Okay. Okay, I said, clutching the cheap uniform to my chest. I will be there. What time? 6 p.m. sharp, Brittany barked. And use the service entrance around the back, the one by the dumpsters. Do not come through the front gate. Security will not let a truck like yours anywhere near the valet. Understood, I said. Terrence looked relieved. Good man, Dad. I knew you would need the money. See you Saturday. They turned around and got back into the Mercedes. The engine roared to life and they reversed out of the driveway, leaving a cloud of exhaust fumes hanging in the air over my garden. I watched them go until the silver car disappeared around the corner. I stood there for a long moment, holding the polyester vest in my hands. The fabric felt scratchy and cheap. $15 an hour, I whispered to the tomato plants. I walked back to my porch and sat down on the creaky swing. I pulled my old flip phone from the pocket of my overalls. It was duct taped together, but it made calls just fine. I dialed a number I knew by heart. The voice on the other end answered on the first ring. It was crisp, professional, and respectful. Good afternoon, Mr. Freeman. How can I help you, sir? It was Wallace, my head of staff at the estate, a man who knew exactly who I was and treated me with more respect than my own son ever had. Wallace, I said, leaning back and looking at the blue sky. Yes, sir. We are going to have guests this weekend. The gala has been confirmed. Yes, Mr. Freeman. The rental agreement is signed. The organizers, a Mr. Terrence Freeman and his wife, are quite demanding. They have been yelling at the staff all morning. I chuckled softly. Let them yell. Wallace, let them feel powerful. Is there anything special you require for the evening? Sir Wallace asked. Yes, I said. There is a change of plans. I will be attending the gala personally. Wallace paused. Shall I prepare the master suite, sir? Shall I have the Rolls-Royce brought around? No, Wallace, I said, watching a butterfly land on my knee. I will be arriving in my truck, and I will be entering through the service entrance. Apparently, I have a job to do. A job, sir? Yes, I have been hired as the bathroom attendant. There was a long silence on the line. I could hear Wallace processing this information, trying to understand if I had finally gone senile. Sir Wallace said carefully, "You want to work as the attendant in your own restroom?" "I do," I said, smiling a cold, dangerous smile. "My son thinks I am an embarrassment, Wallace. He thinks I am only good for cleaning up messes. So I am going to play the part. I am going to let him treat me like the help, right up until the moment I remind him who owns the house." "I understand," Sir Wallace said, his voice warming up. He knew me well. He knew I enjoyed a good lesson. Preparation will proceed as normal. "Do you want the main gate open?" "Yes," I said. "Have security ready." And Wallace, "Yes, sir. Make sure the champagne in the cellar is chilled, the good stuff. The vintage Krug, for the guests, sir." "No," I said, standing up and walking back into my humble house, tossing the cheap uniform onto the table. "For me, after I fire my son. The engine of my 1990 Ford F-150 does not purr. It coughs. It rattles and wheezes like an old man with a chest cold struggling against the incline of the private road that leads up to the cliffs. The truck is a rusted beast, a patchwork of primer gray and faded blue paint with a bumper held on by hope and baling wire. It is the vehicle of a janitor, the vehicle of a man who hauls trash and fixes leaks. It is not the kind of vehicle that belongs on the driveway of a $50 million estate. I shifted gears, the transmission grinding loudly as I rounded the final bend. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of violet and burnt orange, casting a golden glow over the limestone walls of the Freeman estate. Seeing it from this angle always took my breath away, even though I was the one who approved every blueprint and signed every check. The house rose from the cliffside like a modern fortress, glass and steel blending seamlessly with the natural rock. It was a masterpiece of architecture, a symbol of everything I had built in silence while the world assumed I was nothing. But tonight, I was not the owner, coming home to rest. I was the help, coming to scrub the floors. As I approached the massive wrought iron gates, the ones I had imported from a castle in France, I saw a flurry of activity. Valets in crisp white jackets were setting up a podium. Security guards with earpieces were patrolling the perimeter. And standing right in the center of the driveway, directing traffic like a frantic air traffic controller, was my daughter-in-law, Brittany. She was wearing a shimmering gold gown that hugged her body tight, and her hair was piled high on her head in an elaborate updo that must have taken hours. She looked beautiful in the way a statue is beautiful, cold, hard, and expensive. I rolled down my window, the manual crank squeaking in protest. "Good evening, Brittany," I called out, leaning my arm on the doorframe. Brittany spun around, her smile vanishing the moment she saw my truck. Her eyes went wide with horror, as if she had just seen a ghost or a pile of manure dumped on her shoes. She stomped over to the truck, her heels clicking aggressively on the pavement. "What are you doing?" she hissed, her voice a sharp whisper that cut through the engine noise. "Bernard, what on earth are you doing driving this monstrosity up here?" I looked at her confused. "I am here for the gala," I said. "You and Terrence asked me to come work the bathrooms, remember? I know we asked you to work," Brittany snapped, looking around frantically to see if anyone was watching. She waved her hand at the truck as if trying to shoo away a fly. "But we expected you to park down the hill and walk up, or take the bus. Look at this thing. Bernard. It is dripping oil on the cobblestones. This is a black tie event. We have billionaires arriving in 20 minutes. If they see this pile of junk parked next to their Bentleys, they will think we are running a salvage yard." She reached through the window and practically slapped the dashboard. "Turn it around," she screeched. "Move it right now." "Where do you want me to go?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. "The trash area," Brittany shouted, pointing a manicured finger toward a narrow dirt path that wound around the side of the property, heavily obscured by hedges. "Go to the service entrance around the back park by the dumpsters where the catering trucks unload. And for God's sake, do not let anyone see you get out of this thing. You are ruining the aesthetic, Bernard. You are ruining everything." I looked at the dirt path. It was steep, rocky, and led to the ugliest part of the estate, the loading dock where the garbage was collected. It was a mile-long detour uphill, That is a long walk, Brittany, I said quietly. I am 71 years old. Then you better start walking, she said, stepping back and smoothing her dress. Consider it exercise. Just get that eyesore out of my sight before the mayor arrives. Go. Now. She turned her back on me, dismissing me as if I were a stray dog begging for scraps. She went back to shouting at the valets, putting on her fake smile, her mask of sophistication. I put the truck in gear and turned the wheel. The tires crunched on the gravel as I steered away from the grand entrance, away from the warm light of the foyer and onto the dark, narrow service road. I drove slowly, the truck bouncing over ruts and roots. I parked next to a row of overflowing industrial dumpsters that smelled of shrimp shells and old champagne. The catering trucks were already there, blocking most of the space, so I had to squeeze my truck into a patch of mud near the edge of the cliff. I turned off the engine. The silence was sudden and heavy. I sat there for a moment looking at the back of my own house. From here you could see the ventilation shafts, the recycling bins, the cracks in the stucco that the guests out front would never see. It was the unglamorous underbelly of luxury. I opened the door and stepped out into the mud, ruining the shine on my old work boots. I reached into the back seat and grabbed the plastic bag containing my uniform. Then I started to walk. The service road to the staff entrance was a mile-long uphill winding through the dense forest that bordered the estate. Most men my age would have struggled. Most men would have been winded, their hearts pounding, their knees aching. But I am not most men. I have spent 40 years on my feet. 40 years, lifting, mopping, climbing, carrying. My body may be old, but it is forged in iron. I walked with a steady rhythm, my breath coming easy. The air here was cooler, smelling of pine needles and damp earth. As I walked, I stopped for a moment to rest my hand against the rough bark of a massive oak tree. It was older than the house, older than me, its branches spreading out like a canopy over the road. I smiled, touching the wood like it was an old friend. I planted you, I whispered. 20 years ago, this land was just a barren cliffside, a forgotten plot of dirt that nobody wanted. I bought it for pennies on the dollar using a shell company. I came up here on weekends driving this same old truck carrying saplings in the back. I dug the holes myself. I watered them with buckets I carried from the creek. Brittany saw a mile-long walk of shame. I saw a walk through my own history. I patted the tree and continued walking. I passed a row of hydrangeas perfectly pruned, bursting with blue flowers. I remembered planting those too, specifically because blue was my late wife's favorite color. I remembered sitting on this hill, eating a sandwich, looking out at the city view, dreaming of the house I would build one day, a house where my family could be safe, a house where my son could bring his children. I built it for them. I thought walking past the rose garden I built it for Terrence, and he does not even know it. He thinks he is renting a stranger's house to impress strangers. He does not know that every stone in this wall was paid for by the father he is ashamed of. The irony was bitter on my tongue, but I swallowed it. I reached the top of the hill. The back of the mansion loomed over me, 3 stories of illuminated windows. The sound of a string quartet drifted from the front terrace, mixing with the clinking of glasses and the laughter of the rich. I walked toward the staff entrance, a discreet gray door marked staff only. A security guard was standing there, blocking the way. He was young, maybe 22, with a fresh haircut and a uniform that looked too big for him. He held a clipboard and looked nervous, taking his job very seriously. "Hold it right there," he said, stepping in front of me, putting a hand on his belt. I stopped, clutching my plastic bag. "State your business," the guard said, eyeing my worn-out boots and my flannel shirt. "Deliveries go to the bay door on the left. This is for authorized personnel only. I am here to work," I said politely. "I am the bathroom attendant." The guard frowned, looking down at his list. He scanned the names, running his finger down the page. "Don't see any bathroom attendant listed," he said, looking suspicious. "And even if you are late, and you don't have a badge. I can't let you in without a badge. Old man, you need to turn around and leave. This is a high-security event." "I am Bernard Freeman," I said. "My son Terrence is organizing the event. He hired me." The guard laughed, a short, sharp bark of disbelief. "Yeah, right," he said. "And I am the Queen of England. Look, pal. Terrence Freeman is the guy in the tuxedo out front driving a Ferrari. He is not related to a guy who looks like he just crawled out of a landscaping truck. Now beat it before I call the cops for trespassing." He reached for his radio, ready to call in a disturbance. I stood my ground. I did not raise my voice. I did not get angry. I just looked at him with the patience of a man who owns the building. The guard is standing on. "Young man," I said, "call your supervisor." "I don't need to call anyone," the guard snapped, stepping closer, trying to intimidate me. "You are leaving, now." Suddenly the heavy metal door opened from the inside. "What is the problem out here?" a deep voice boomed. A large man stepped out. He was built like a tank, wearing a black tactical suit with an earpiece coiled behind his ear. He had a scar running down his chin and eyes that had seen everything. This was Marcus, the head of my private security detail. A man I had hired 5 years ago. A man who knew exactly who signed his checks. The young guard jumped, snapping to attention. "Sir," he stammered, "this individual is trying to gain access. He claims to be related to the organizer, but he has no credentials. I was just about to remove him." Marcus looked at the guard, then he looked at me. His eyes went wide. For a split second, I saw the recognition flash across his face. I saw him start to raise his hand to salute. I saw his mouth open to say, "Good evening, Mr. Freeman." I locked eyes with him. I raised my index finger slowly and pressed it against my lips. Shh. It was a subtle gesture, barely a movement. But Marcus caught it instantly. He was a professional. He stopped his salute mid-air, turning it into a cough. He composed his face, masking his surprise. Marcus looked at the young guard, his voice dropping to a low growl. "Stand down, rookie," he said. "But sir," the young guard protested. "He is not on the list. He is on my list," Marcus said, stepping aside and holding the door open, giving me a nod of deep respect that the rookie couldn't see. "Let him in. He is the specialist. We requested for the sanitation detail." The rookie looked confused, looking from Marcus to me and back again. "The specialist for sanitation." "You heard me," Marcus barked. "Get back to your post." The rookie scrambled away, moving to the far side of the loading dock. Marcus looked at me as I stepped onto the threshold of my own home. He leaned in close so only I could hear. "Welcome home, Mr. Freeman," he whispered. "Is everything all right, sir? Why are you dressed like that? Everything is exactly as it should be." "Marcus," I whispered back, winking at him. "Just play along tonight?" "I am undercover." "Understood, sir." Marcus said, a small smile playing on his lips. He tapped his earpiece, speaking into the mic. "All units, be advised. We have a VIP on the premises. I repeat, VIP is in the building disguised as staff. Do not interfere. Maintain standard protocol." I walked past him into the long white hallway of the service wing. The air smelled of expensive perfume and roasting lamb. I was in. I walked toward the locker room to change into my polyester vest, ready to scrub the toilets in the castle I had built, ready to serve the people who thought they were better than me. Let the games begin. The transition from the service corridor to the grand ballroom was like stepping from a submarine into the sun. One moment I was in a narrow gray hallway smelling of floor wax, and the next I was standing on the edge of a world made of light. The grand hall of the Freeman estate is a masterpiece of design, even if I do say so myself. The ceiling soars 30 feet high, adorned with 3 massive crystal chandeliers that I had imported from a castle in Vienna. They refract the light into a million rainbows dancing across the walls. The floor is a continuous expanse of white Carrara marble, polished to such a high sheen that the guests looked like they were walking on water. I stood in the shadow of a large potted fern, clutching my plastic bag of cheap clothes, taking it all in. The string quartet was playing Vivaldi perfectly in tune. The air was thick with the scent of fresh lilies and expensive perfume. It was exactly as I had envisioned it when I drew the sketches on a napkin 10 years ago. It was a palace of dreams. But tonight I was not the king of the castle. I was the ghost haunting the edges. I saw my son Terrence across the room. He was working the crowd like a politician running for his life. He was shaking hands, laughing a little too loudly, pouring wine for men he clearly feared. He looked handsome in his tuxedo, but I could see the sweat glistening on his forehead. I could see the tightness in his jaw. He was terrified. He spotted me lurking by the fern and his face went pale. He excused himself from a conversation with a man I recognized as a local bank president and marched toward me. His steps were fast aggressive. He grabbed my arm, his grip tight and painful, pulling me deeper into the shadows of an alcove away from the prying eyes of his investors. "Dad," he hissed, looking around frantically. "What are you doing standing here? You look like a hobo. I am here to work." "Terrence," I said, keeping my voice low. "I was just looking for the restroom." "You are not here to look," Terrence snapped. He was vibrating with anxiety. "You are here to disappear. Listen to me very carefully." He leaned in close, his breath smelling of scotch and mints. "This night is critical for me, Dad. Critical. I have $5 million in potential investment capital in this room. If I land these contracts, my firm is saved. If I don't, I am finished. Do you understand that, finished?" I looked at him. I knew exactly what finished meant. For Terrence, it meant losing the leased Ferrari and the condo downtown. For me, finished meant not having food on the table. But I nodded. "I understand, son," I said. "Good," Terrence said, wiping his forehead with a silk handkerchief. "Now here are the rules. You are going to go into the main men's restroom on the east wing. You are going to put on that uniform and you are going to stay there. You do not come out for food, you do not come out for fresh air. You stand by the sinks, you hand out towels, and you keep the place spotless. If someone gets sick, if someone misses the bowl, you clean it up." Immediately I looked at the marble floor. I looked at the son I had carried on my shoulders when he was tired. "I will do a good job," I said. "And one more thing," Terrence said, his eyes narrowing. "And this is the most important thing. You are not my father tonight." I felt a cold wind blow through my heart despite the warmth of the room. "Excuse me," I asked. "If anyone asks," Terrence said, his voice hard and cruel. "You are a temp. We hired you from an agency this morning. I don't know you. You don't know me. You are just Bernard the janitor. Do not embarrass me by calling me son. Do not try to introduce yourself to my friends. Do not exist. Dad, just wipe the counters." He squeezed my arm one last time, hard enough to bruise. "Do we have a deal?" he asked. I looked at him. I saw the fear in his eyes, the desperation of a man who has built a house of cards and is terrified of a breeze. I could have ended it right there. I could have walked to the microphone on the stage and announced that I owned the building, and the land, and the very air he was breathing. But I didn't. "We have a deal, Mr. Freeman," I said. Terrence didn't even flinch at the formality. He just nodded, relieved. "Good. Now get in there, and for God's sake, fix your hair. You look a mess." He turned on his heel and walked back into the light, putting his smile back on like a mask. I watched him go. Then I walked toward the east wing, clutching my bag. I entered the men's restroom. It feels strange to call it a restroom. It is more like a sanctuary. The walls are lined with black and gold vein marble. The sinks are carved from solid blocks of granite. The faucets are gold-plated, shaped like swans. I remember selecting these faucets. I remember arguing with the contractor about the water pressure. I wanted everything to be perfect. I went into the handicap stall, the only place with a mirror where I could be alone. I took off my flannel shirt and my work boots. I put on the polyester trousers Terrence had given me. They were too short, riding up my ankles. The vest was tight across my chest, the fabric scratching my skin. It smelled of industrial laundry detergent and someone else's sweat. I looked in the mirror. I saw an old man in a cheap uniform. A servant. A nobody. I unlocked the stall and stepped out, ready to work. The evening passed in a blur of humiliation. Men in tuxedos came in and out. They ignored me completely, treating me like part of the furniture. I handed them fresh linen towels, expecting nothing. Most took them without a word. Some wiped their hands and dropped the towel on the floor right in front of me, waiting for me to pick it up. One man, a young stockbroker with slicked back hair, washed his hands and looked at me in the mirror. "Hey, Pops," he said, tossing a wet towel at my chest. "Nice vest." I caught the towel. "My hands are quick." "Thank you, sir," I said quietly. He laughed and walked out, leaving a dollar bill on the wet counter. A tip, a crumb for the peasant. I picked up the dollar and put it in the jar. I stood straight, shoulders back. My dignity did not come from my clothes. It came from my patience. Around 10 o'clock, the door opened and a group of men walked in. It was Terrence and 3 of his associates. They were laughing loud, boisterous, carrying tumblers of whiskey. I stiffened. I stepped back against the wall, folding my hands behind my back, making myself invisible. Terrence didn't even look at me. He walked straight to the urinal, continuing his conversation. "This place is incredible, Terrence," the man next to him said, looking around at the gold fixtures. "I mean, seriously, who owns this?" I have been to the White House and it doesn't have faucets like this. Terrence laughed, the sound echoing off the marble. Some recluse billionaire, Terrence said, zipping up and moving to the sink. He turned on the water, washing his hands with the soap I had refilled 10 minutes ago. I heard he made his money in tech back in the 80s. Got in on the ground floor with Apple or Microsoft, something like that. The third man, the third. Shook his head, looking at the ceiling detail. 50 million, easy, the man said. Probably more with the land. This guy must be a genius, the way he positioned the house to catch the sunset. It takes vision. Terrence dried his hands on the towel I handed him. He didn't make eye contact. He didn't say thank you. He just took it like I was a dispenser. Yeah, Terrence said, tossing the towel into the basket. Well, whoever he is, he knows how to live. I bet he is. Some old white tycoon sitting on a yacht in the Mediterranean right now, laughing at all of us working stiffs. The group laughed. You know, Terrence said, leaning against the counter, looking at his reflection in the mirror, adjusting his tie right in front of me. I wish I had that kind of lineage. What do you mean, the associate asked. I mean, look at this. Terrence gestured to the room, to the wealth represented by the stone and gold. I wish I came from stock like this. Imagine having a father who built an empire, a father who could teach you how to be a king, instead of just a worker bee. He paused, looking at his friends with a sad, wistful expression. My dad, Terrence scoffed. He is a good guy, I guess, but he is a zero. He spent 40 years pushing a broom. He lives in a rental that smells like cabbage. He drives a truck that should be in a museum for junk. He never took a risk in his life. He never built anything. He just cleaned up other people's messes. I stood there 3 feet away, my heart hammered against my ribs. He thinks. Small. Terrence continued. He has a small life. Small dreams. It is embarrassing, honestly, trying to explain him to people like you guys. That is why I keep him away from events like this. He just doesn't fit the picture. The associate clapped Terrence on the shoulder. Hey man, we can't choose our parents, the associate said. At least you made it out. You are a self-made man, Terrence. That is worth something. Yeah, Terrence said, straightening his jacket, looking at himself in the mirror with pride. Self-made. That is me. Everything. Have I earned despite him? He looked at me then, not at my eyes, but at my vest. Hey you, he snapped, snapping his fingers. Towel. I handed him another towel. My hand did not shake. My face did not change. He wiped a spot of water off his lapel and threw the towel on the floor. Let us go, gentlemen, Terrence said. The auction is starting. I want a bid on that vintage wine. They walked out, leaving me alone in the gold-plated room. I stood there in the silence. He wished for a father who built an empire. He wished for a father who wasn't a janitor. I looked at the gold faucet shaped like a swan. I reached out and turned the handle. The water flowed clear and cold. He is right, I whispered to the empty room. I am a janitor. I picked up the towel he had thrown on the floor, and tonight I am going to clean house, starting with the trash that just walked out the door. The thumping bass of the DJ set vibrated through the walls of the service corridor, a dull, rhythmic thud that sounded like a headache waiting to happen. I had been standing in the men's room for 2 hours, handing out towels to men who looked through me as if I were made of glass. My legs were aching, not from age, but from the sheer tension of holding my tongue. I needed a moment of silence, a moment to breathe air that didn't smell of expensive cologne and arrogance. I stepped out of the restroom and walked down the long, narrow hallway that led to the catering kitchen. This was the veins of the house, the hidden passages where the real work happened. It was lined with gray concrete and exposed pipes, a stark contrast to the gold and marble just 50 feet away. I turned the corner near the linen closet, and I heard it. A sound that breaks a grandfather's heart faster than any bullet. Sobbing. It was soft, stifled, trying to be hidden, but I knew that cry. It was the sound of a bird with a broken wing. I hurried forward, my heavy work boots thudding softly on the linoleum. Huddled in the alcove between a stack of chairs and a cart full of dirty dishes was Maya. My granddaughter is 18 years old. She has eyes like her grandmother, deep and soulful, and a spirit that is made of light. But tonight she looked dim. She was wearing a pale pink dress that must have cost a fortune, but she was sitting on the cold floor, her knees pulled up to her chest, ruining the silk. She had kicked off her high heels, and her mascara was running down her cheeks in dark, jagged lines. Maya, I whispered, kneeling down beside her. My knees cracked loudly, but I didn't care. She looked up, startled, fear flashing in her eyes as if she expected to be scolded. "Grandpa?" She gasped, wiping her face frantically. "Oh, Grandpa, you shouldn't be here. Mom will be so mad if she sees you talking to me," she said. "I am not allowed to go near the staff area." I ignored the warning. I reached out and took her hand. Her fingers were ice, cold. "Why are you crying, little bird?" I asked, using the nickname I had given her when she was 5. Maya looked at the door to make sure we were alone. Then she collapsed into my arms, burying her face in the scratchy polyester of my cheap vest. "I hate it here, Grandpa," she sobbed. "I hate all of this. The party, the people, the fake smiles. I want to go home." I stroked her hair, smoothing down the curls. "It is just one night, Maya," I said softly. "It will be over soon." "It is not just tonight," she said, pulling back, her eyes red and swollen. "It is my whole life, Grandpa. They told me today. They told me the plan." "The plan?" I asked, feeling a knot of dread tighten in my stomach. "Mom and Dad," Maya said, her voice shaking. "They sat me down before the guests arrived. They said I cannot go to Parsons. They said I cannot study art." Parsons School of Design had been Maya's dream since she first picked up a crayon. She was talented, truly talented. She could look at a landscape and capture the wind in the trees. She had been accepted early admission with a scholarship. "But you have the acceptance letter," I said. "You have the scholarship." "They turned it down," Maya whispered. "They what?" My voice rose an octave. "They declined the offer. Grandpa. They sent a letter withdrawing my application without even asking me. They said art is a hobby. They said it does not pay the bills. They enrolled me in the business program at the State University for the fall semester. I felt the blood boil in my veins, hot and fast. "Business," I spat. "The girl hates math. She has the soul of a poet, not an accountant. They said I have to do it." Maya cried, tears spilling over again. "They said the family is in trouble, Grandpa, financial trouble. They said I need to learn how to manage money so I can save the family legacy. They said I need to marry someone rich, someone from the business school to help pay off Dad's debts. They are selling my future to fix their mistakes." I sat back on my heels, stunned. The audacity of my son was limitless. He had squandered his own opportunities, he had burned through cash like it was paper, and now he was trying to use his daughter as a life raft. He was clipping her wings to feather his own nest. "It is not fair," Maya choked out. "I don't care about money. I don't care about big houses or fancy cars. I just want to paint Grandpa. I just want to be free." I looked at her, at the devastation on her young face. She was the only good thing that had come from Terrence, the only person in this family who saw me as a human being. I reached into the deep pocket of my slacks. I bypassed the lint and the few crumpled dollar bills I had received as tips. I felt for the small gold foil rectangle I had hidden there earlier. "Here," I said softly, pressing it into her hand. Maya looked down. It was a chocolate bar, but not just any chocolate bar. It was a bar of Tuscher champagne, truffle chocolate, imported directly from Zurich. It was wrapped in gold foil with elegant black lettering. It cost $50 a bar, and you could not buy it in any store in this country. I had a case of them flown in weekly to the estate because it was my one indulgence. Maya frowned, wiping her eyes. "Where did you get this?" "Grandpa," she asked, sniffing. "This looks fancy." I winked at her, a conspiratorial twinkle in my eye. "A friend gave it to me." I lied smoothly. "An old friend from Switzerland. He knows I have a sweet tooth. Go on, eat it. It will make you feel better." Maya peeled back the foil, breaking off a piece. She put it in her mouth and her eyes widened, the rich, complex flavor melting on her tongue. "It is amazing," she whispered. "It tastes like magic." "It is magic," I said. "It is the taste of quality, Maya. And that is what you are. You are quality. You are rare. You are not meant to be crushed into a mold to fit your father's failures." I took her hand again, gripping it firmly. "Listen to me, little bird," I said, my voice dropping to a low, intense rumble. Maya looked at me, captivated by the sudden strength in my tone. "You are going to go to Parsons," I said. Maya shook her head sadly. "I can't, Grandpa. They cut me off. They took my credit cards, they took my savings account. They said if I don't go to business school, I am on my own. I have no money for tuition. Money is just paper, I said, dismissing it with a wave of my hand. You have something more valuable. You have vision. But how, Grandpa? You barely have enough for rent. I can't ask you for help, I smiled. It was a sad smile, but it held a secret fire. You let me worry about the how. I said I may look like an old janitor in a cheap vest, but I have friends. Maya, I have resources you do not know about. I leaned in closer, whispering as if sharing a state secret. I promise you, on your grandmother's grave, you will study art. You will go to New York. You will paint until your fingers ache, and you will never have to worry about your father's debts ever again. Really? Maya whispered, hope flickering in her eyes like a candle. Really, I said. Suddenly the door at the end of the hallway banged open. Sound echoed like a gunshot. Maya jumped, dropping the chocolate bar. Brittany stood in the doorway. Her silhouette was framed by the bright light of the kitchen. She looked like a vengeful angel in her gold dress, her face twisted into a mask of pure fury. There you are, Brittany shrieked, marching down the hallway, her heels clicking like bullets. Maya, what on earth are you doing sitting on the floor in the filth? You are missing the auction. The son of the oil tycoon is looking for you. Brittany reached us, towering over where we sat. She looked at me with a disgust so profound it felt physical. And you, she spat at me. Get away from her. Bernard, you are getting dirt on her dress. Do you know how much that silk costs? I stood up slowly, my knees popping. I dusted off my knees with dignity. She was upset, Brittany, I said calmly. I was comforting her. Comforting her. Brittany laughed a harsh, cruel sound. You are embarrassing her. You are embarrassing us. Why are you not in the bathroom? I walked past the men's room, and it is unattended. What if a VIP needs a towel? Bernard, you are neglecting your duties. She looked down at the floor. She saw the gold foil of the chocolate bar sitting on the dirty linoleum. What is this? Brittany asked, wrinkling her nose. She bent down and picked it up, holding it between two fingers, as if it were a dead rat. It is chocolate, Maya said, her voice small. Grandpa gave it to me. Brittany scoffed, looking at the wrapper. She didn't recognize the brand. She didn't know that the chocolate in her hand cost more than the lunch she had eaten that day. She just saw something given by a janitor and assumed it was garbage. Ugh, Brittany groaned. You are feeding her this cheap convenience store junk. Bernard, seriously. She is on a strict diet. She has to fit into her debutante dress next month, and you are shoving sugar and preservatives down her throat. Brittany threw the chocolate. It sailed through the air and landed in the open trash can on the cleaning cart. It landed with a soft thud amongst the used paper towels and coffee grounds. That was imported. Swiss chocolate, I said, my voice tightening. It was trash, Brittany snapped, cutting me off just like you and your truck. Now get back to work before I tell Terrence to dock your pay. We are not paying you $15 an hour to sit around and have a picnic in the hallway. She grabbed Maya by the arm, digging her nails into the girl's soft skin. Oh, Mom, you are hurting me, Maya cried. Come on, Brittany hissed, yanking her up. You need to fix your face. You look like a raccoon. We are going to the powder room, and then you are going to go out there and smile at the oil tycoon's son. And if you mention art school one more time, I will sell your easel for firewood. Do you understand me? Maya nodded, tears spilling fresh down her cheeks. Brittany turned to me one last time, her eyes cold and dead. Stay away from her. Bernard, she warned, you are a bad influence. We don't want her thinking it is okay to end up like you, a nobody. She turned and dragged Maya down the hallway. I watched them go, listening to Maya's heels scuffing against the floor, listening to Brittany's scolding voice fading into the distance. I looked at the trash can. I walked over and looked inside at the gold foil glinting among the garbage. I reached in and picked it up. I brushed off a piece of lint. You think I am a nobody, Brittany? I whispered to the empty hallway. You threw away $50 of chocolate because you didn't know its value, just like you are throwing away your daughter. I put the chocolate in my pocket. I am going to enjoy watching you choke on the truth, I said. I adjusted my vest. I straightened my tie, and then I walked back to the bathroom, ready to finish the job, ready to wait for the moment when the lights would go out and the real Bernard Freeman would step into the light. The bathroom was a sanctuary compared to the floor. At least in the bathroom, I was invisible. I was just a fixture, like the towel dispenser or the sink. But out here on the ballroom floor, under the blaze of the chandeliers I had paid for, I was a target. The catering manager, a frantic man with a headset and a clipboard, grabbed me by the arm, his grip tight and desperate. "We are down 2 servers," he hissed, shoving a heavy silver tray into my hands. "Get out there and circulate. This is the 1982 Petrus and the guests are getting thirsty. Do not drop it or I will dock your pay for a year." I looked at the tray. It was heavy loaded with 12 crystal glasses of red wine. I recognized the vintage immediately. It was from my private cellar. A Bordeaux that cost $4,000 a bottle. I had bought cases of it at an auction in Paris 10 years ago, saving it for a special occasion. I never imagined that occasion would be serving it to people who despised me while wearing a polyester vest that smelled of onions. I stepped out into the crowd. The noise was deafening, a wall of laughter and clinking glass, and the drone of people trying to impress each other. I moved slowly, navigating the sea of black tuxedos and designer gowns. My eyes were downcast, playing the part of the humble servant, but my ears were open. I heard them talking about money, about mergers, about summer homes in the Hamptons. They spoke of wealth as if it were a character trait, as if having money made them better than the people who served them. I saw Terrence and Brittany near the center of the room, holding court under the main chandelier. Brittany was glowing, radiating a cold, triumphant light. She was wearing a white silk gown that trailed on the floor behind her, a dress she had bragged about for weeks, claiming it was a custom design from Milan. She was laughing at something, a short, balding man was saying, throwing her head back, exposing the long line of her throat. I tried to steer clear of them. I tried to weave through the perimeter of the room, offering wine to the stragglers. But the floor plan of the estate is designed to funnel people toward the center, and the crowd pushed me inward like a piece of driftwood caught in a tide. I found myself standing just a few feet away from my son and his wife. They did not see me. They were too busy fawning over the short man. "Mr. Henderson," Terrence said, his voice dripping with oil. "We are so honored you could come. We were just saying that your portfolio performance last quarter was legendary." Mr. Henderson puffed on a cigar, ignoring the no-smoking rule I had strictly enforced for years. "Well, Terrence, you know what they say," Henderson chuckled. "Money never sleeps. But tell me about this house. It is magnificent, truly. You must have paid a fortune for it." Terrence froze for a second, then laughed nervously. "Oh, well. You know real estate is my passion," Terrence lied. "We have had this place in the family for a while, just a little getaway spot." I gripped the tray tighter, my knuckles turning white. A little getaway spot. He was claiming my life's work, my masterpiece, as his own little vacation home. The audacity was breathtaking. I turned to leave, needing to get away from the lie before I said something I would regret. But as I turned, I made eye contact with a man standing to my left. He was young, tall, and had the arrogant sneer of someone who has never heard the word no in his life. He was one of Terrence's college buddies, a man named Brad who used to park his sports car on my lawn when he came over to study. Brad looked at me. He looked at the tray of expensive wine. Then he looked at Brittany's pristine white dress just a few feet away. A wicked smile curled on his lips. It was the smile of a predator seeing a wounded gazelle. I tried to step past him. "Excuse me, sir," I murmured, keeping my head down. Brad didn't move. Instead, he shifted his weight. Just as I stepped forward, his leg shot out. It was not an accident. It was not a stumble. It was a calculated precision strike. Aimed right at my ankle, I felt his patent leather shoe hook behind my boot, and my balance vanished. I went down. It happened in slow motion, the way disasters always do. I felt gravity take hold, dragging me toward the marble floor. I tried to save the tray. I tried to twist my body to take the impact on my shoulder, but I was 71 years old, and physics is a cruel mistress. The tray tipped. The 12 glasses of 1982. Petrus launched into the air, a crimson arc of liquid money flying through the light of the chandelier. Crash. The sound of shattering crystal cut through the room like a gunshot, silencing the string quartet instantly. But it was followed by a sound that was even worse. A scream. A high-pitched shriek of pure, unadulterated horror. I hit the floor hard, my hips slamming against the stone, pain shooting up my spine. I lay there for a second, stunned, covered in broken glass and red wine, watching the red liquid pool around me like blood. Then I looked up. Brittany was standing over me. Her hands were clawed in front of her face, her mouth open in a perfect circle of rage. The white silk dress was gone, replaced by a tie, dyed nightmare of dark purple and blood-red stains. The wine had hit her square in the chest, soaking into the delicate fabric, running down the skirt in long, jagged rivers, ruining the custom design from Milan in a heartbeat. "You idiot," Brittany screamed. Her voice cracked, breaking into a sob of fury. "Look what you did. Look what you did to me." The room was dead silent. 300 guests were staring at us, their mouths agape, holding their breath. I tried to push myself up, my hands slipping on the wet marble. "I am sorry, ma'am," I stammered, playing the part, my voice trembling with shock. "It was an accident. The gentleman, he tripped me." "Liar!" Brad shouted, stepping forward, pointing a finger at me, crying out with fake indignation. "I saw him stumble. He was drunk. Look at him. He can't even stand up straight." Brittany didn't care about Brad. She didn't care about the truth. She only cared about the silk. She lunged at me. Before I could get to my knees, she slapped me. It was a hard, stinging slap across my face, the sound echoing off the vaulted ceiling. "Smack, you clumsy old fool," she hissed, spitting the words at me. "Do you have any idea what you just did? This dress cost $5,000. $5,000. You could work for the rest of your pathetic life and you would never be able to pay for the zipper on this gown." I touched my cheek. The skin was burning, but the coldness in my chest was spreading, turning my shock into something harder, something like steel. I looked at Terrence. He was standing next to her, looking down at me. He looked at the wine on the floor. He looked at the guests whispering behind their hands. He looked at his ruined gala. He didn't see his father lying on the floor surrounded by broken glass. He didn't see the man who had paid for his tuition, who had held him when he cried over a scraped knee. He saw a stain. He saw an embarrassment. He saw a liability. "Dad," Terrence whispered, his face pale with humiliation. Then his expression hardened. He made a choice in that split second. He chose his image over his blood. He stepped forward and shoved me. He put his hands on my shoulders and pushed me back down onto the wet floor. Hard. "Get out!" Terrence roared, his voice shaking with rage. "Get out of my sight right now, Terrence," I said, looking up at him. Disbelief warring with the pain. "Don't speak to me!" Terrence screamed. "You are fired. You are done. Get your trash and get out. Go to the kitchen and wash dishes until you work off the cost of this dress. I don't want to see your face again tonight. Go!" He pointed toward the service doors, his finger trembling. The crowd murmured, watching the spectacle. The rich tycoon banishing the clumsy servant. It was theater to them. I looked at my son. I looked at the man I had raised, the man I had protected, the man I had built this entire empire for. Something broke inside me. It wasn't my heart. My heart had been breaking for years. This was different. This was the final link in the chain, snapping. I nodded slowly. I rolled onto my knees, ignoring the shards of crystal biting into my skin. I placed my hands on the floor and pushed myself up. I stood up slowly, unfolding my tall frame until I was towering over Brittany. I brushed a piece of glass off my polyester sleeve. I wiped a splash of wine from my cheek. I straightened my tie. The room was still silent, waiting for me to beg, waiting for me to cry, waiting for the old janitor to crumble. But I didn't crumble. I looked at Brittany, staring into her eyes, seeing the fear behind the anger, seeing the shallowness of her soul. I looked at Terrence, seeing the cowardice in his stance. Then I looked at the dress, the ruined masterpiece. $5,000. I said, my voice low and calm, carrying through the silent room like a bell. Brittany blinked, surprised by my tone. "What?" she snapped. "You said the dress cost $5,000, I repeated, my eyes cold as the ice in the champagne buckets. "Yes, you moron," Brittany yelled. "And you owe me every penny," I smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a banker foreclosing on a home. It was the smile of a judge passing a life sentence. I leaned in close so only she and Terrence could hear me. "Okay," I whispered. $5,000. I looked at Terrence. "Remember that number, son? Because before this night is over, you are going to wish that $5,000 was all you owed me." I turned my back on them. I walked through the crowd, the sea of tuxedos parting for me like the Red Sea. I walked with my head high, my boots clicking on the marble, leaving a trail of red wine footprints behind me. I walked toward the kitchen, not to wash dishes, but to start the fire. I pushed open the double doors and let them swing shut behind me, cutting off the music, cutting off the laughter. I stood in the quiet of the service hallway. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. "It is time, Wallace," I said into the receiver. "Burn it down." The industrial dishwasher hummed with a low, aggressive growl vibrating against the metal counter where I stood. The water was scalding hot, steaming up into my face, smelling of lemon detergent and other people's half-eaten dinners. I wore the heavy rubber gloves that reached up to my elbows, protecting my skin from the grease. But nothing could protect my pride from the sting of my son's words. I was 71 years old. I owned the building I was standing in. I owned the land for 3 miles in every direction. Yet here I was scrubbing lipstick stains off crystal glasses because my son needed to feel superior. Through the swinging double doors of the kitchen, I could hear the party shifting gears. The frantic energy of the early evening had settled into a low hum of anticipation, like the air before a thunderstorm. I scrubbed a plate, rinsing it with the high-pressure sprayer, watching the water swirl down the drain, taking the filth with it. Out in the driveway, the atmosphere was changing. Local bankers and the car dealership owners my son had invited were suddenly being pushed aside. The real power had arrived. I could hear the distinct heavy thud of car doors that cost more than houses closing. The valets were scrambling. I could imagine their panic trying to park a fleet of Rolls-Royce Phantoms and Maybachs without scratching the paint. These were not Terrence's friends. These were my friends. Or rather, they were the friends of B. Freeman, the ghost, the legend, the silent partner they had all done business with for decades, but never met in person. I dried my hands on a rag and pushed the kitchen door open just a crack, peering through the small circular window. The grand hall had gone quiet. Walking through the main entrance was a phalanx of power. Leading them was David Chen, the CEO of Chen Tech, a man whose microchips ran half the planet. He was wearing a tuxedo that fit him like armor, his face unsmiling. Next to him was Victoria Sterling, the matriarch of New York real estate, real, woman who could level a city block with a phone call. Behind them were 3 others, hedge fund managers, venture capitalists, the titans of industry. Terrence stood in the center of the room, holding a glass of champagne frozen. He looked like a deer caught in the headlights of a freight train. He knew who these people were. He had their photos on his vision board in his office. He had cold called their secretaries 1,000 times and been hung up on every single time. Now they were in his living room. I watched Terrence compose himself. He smoothed his hair, flashed his brightest, whitest smile and stepped forward, extending his hand like he was the King of England, welcoming subjects. "Mr. Chen, Mrs. Sterling," Terrence said, his voice cracking slightly before he found his rhythm. "What an unexpected honor I am. Terrence Freeman, the organizer of this gala. Welcome to my humble event. David." Chen did not shake his hand. He looked at Terrence's outstretched palm as if it were a dead fish, then looked up at Terrence's face with bored indifference. "We did not come for the gala, young man," Chen said, his voice deep and gravelly. "We received an invitation from the owner of this estate." Terrence blinked, confused. He puffed out his chest, trying to salvage his ego. "Well, you are in the right place," Terrence said, laughing nervously. "I am the Freeman in charge tonight. I rented this venue specifically to host visionaries like yourselves. Please come in, have a drink. Let me introduce you to my team. Victoria." Sterling stepped forward. She was 60 years old, elegant as a panther, and twice as dangerous. She looked around the room, her eyes scanning the crowd, ignoring the decorations, ignoring the desperate social climbers. "We are not here to meet your team," Victoria said coldly. "We are here to pay our respects to Mr. B. Freeman. The invitation said he would be in attendance tonight." Terrence looked blank. "B. Freeman?" he asked. "Yes, B. Freeman," Chen snapped. "The investor, the man who predicted the housing crash of 2008. The man who funded my startup when every bank in Silicon Valley laughed at me. The man is a legend, a phantom. We have done business for 30 years via email and proxy, but tonight he promised to reveal himself." The crowd went silent, whispering nervously. Who was B. Freeman? Was he here? Was he hiding? Terrence laughed. It was a loud, incredulous sound that echoed off the marble walls. I think there has been a mistake, Terrence said, smiling condescendingly at the billionaires. You guys are looking for a myth. There is no B. Freeman tycoon. This estate is owned by a shell company. I checked the deed myself. And as for Freeman, well, that is a common name. He took a sip of his champagne, looking relaxed now that he thought he understood the confusion. You see, my last name is Freeman, Terrence said. Maybe you got confused by the invite. I am the rising star in real estate. Maybe you heard of me. David Chen looked at Terrence with pity, pure and simple. Young man, Chen said quietly, I do mistakes. And I certainly do not confuse rising stars with supernovas. B. Freeman is the largest private shareholder in my company. He owns this mountain. We are here to meet him. Now where is he? Terrence looked at Brittany, who had joined him. She shrugged, equally confused. B. Freeman, Terrence muttered to himself. Then a look of realization crossed his face, a look of amusement. Wait a minute. Terrence chuckled, shaking his head. You guys cannot be serious. B. Freeman, Bernard. Freeman. He looked at the billionaires, grinning like they had just told a hilarious joke. My dad's name is Bernard, Terrence said. B. Freeman. But trust me, he is not the guy you are looking for, unless your legendary investor specializes in unclogging toilets and mopping floors. The crowd erupted in laughter. It started with a few nervous titters from Terrence's friends and then spread like a wave, relief washing over them, laughing at the absurdity of the idea. Victoria Sterling did not laugh. Her eyes narrowed. Your father is Bernard Freeman? She asked. Yeah, Terrence said, wiping a tear of laughter from his eye. Good old Bernie. But he is no tycoon. He is a janitor. Retired, actually. He spent 40 years pushing a broom at a tech company. Chen's eyes widened slightly, a spark of recognition. A tech company, Chen asked. Which one? Some old startup. Terrence waved his hand dismissively. Data systems or something. Defunct now. He has a pension and a beat-up truck. That is his empire. Terrence gestured toward the kitchen doors, toward where I was standing. In fact, if you really want to meet a Bernard Freeman, he is back there right now. Terrence pointed a finger directly at my hiding spot, laughing cruelly. We were short-staffed, so I hired him to wash dishes and hand out towels. He is scrubbing pots as we speak, so unless you need your shoes shined, I think you are looking for the wrong guy. The room roared with laughter, mocking the idea, mocking the invisible man in the kitchen. Brittany chimed in, hooking her arm through Terrence's. It is true. She giggled, her dress still stained with wine, but her arrogance untouched. Poor Bernard. He is a sweet old man, but he is a little senile. He likes to pretend he knows about business, but he barely knows how to use a microwave. We let him help out tonight so he could feel useful. You know, charity starts at home. Victoria Sterling looked at the kitchen doors. She did not look amused. She looked intrigued. He is in the kitchen, she asked. Yep, Terrence said, grabbing a fresh bottle of wine, ready to pour for the billionaires washing dishes. Try not to stare at him if he comes out. He gets confused easily. David Chen looked at Victoria. They exchanged a look that spoke volumes, a look that said, could it be because they knew something? Terrence did not. They knew that the mysterious B. Freeman who had made them all rich was famous for his humility. They knew he refused to attend board meetings. They knew he signed his emails with quotes about hard work and patience, and they knew that a man who pushes a broom sees everything while everyone else is looking at the ceiling. I stepped back from the window, letting the door swing shut gently. I walked back to the sink. I turned on the water again, letting the steam rise around me. They were laughing out there. My son was making me the punchline of his biggest night. He was selling me out for a cheap laugh to impress people who would not spit on him if he was on fire. I picked up a scouring pad and attacked a pot, scrubbing hard. Laugh, Terrence, I whispered to the soapy water. Laugh while you can, because David Chen just asked where I was, and Victoria Sterling is looking at these doors like she is expecting a king to walk through them. I am not going to disappoint them. But first I have to finish the dishes, because a job started is a job finished. And unlike you, son, I never leave a mess behind. I scrubbed faster, my heart pounding a steady rhythm against my ribs. The water was hot. The soap was stinging. But I felt cold, calculated. B. Freeman. They were going to get him, and when they did, Terrence was going to wish he had stayed in the bathroom with me. The kitchen was a furnace of noise and steam, but the hallway leading to the private library was dead silent. It was the silence of a tomb, and the air was cooler here, smelling of old paper and leather polish. I had been sent to empty the trash bins in the east wing, a task that felt fitting for the invisible man I had become. I pushed the gray cart slowly, the rubber wheels squeaking rhythmically on the parquet floor. My back ached from standing over the sink, and my hands were raw from the harsh soap, but my mind was sharp, sharper than it had been in years. I approached the library door. It was a massive slab of walnut wood carved with intricate patterns of vines and leaves. I remembered carving the initial draft of those patterns myself on a piece of scrap wood 20 years ago, dreaming of a room where I could read in peace without the noise of the city intrusion. The door was cracked open just an inch, spilling a sliver of golden light into the dark hallway I intended to walk past to collect the bin from the study, but a voice stopped me. It was a voice I knew better than my own. It was the voice of my son, Terrence, but it was not the booming, confident voice he used in the ballroom. It was a hushed, desperate whisper, the sound of a man standing on the edge of a cliff negotiating with gravity. "Listen, Julian, you have to make this happen," Terrence hissed. I froze. I pulled the cart back into the shadows of a large bust of Lincoln and pressed myself against the wall. I peered through the crack in the door, my heart hammering against my ribs. Inside the library, Terrence was pacing back and forth, wearing a path in the Persian rug. He held a glass of scotch in one hand and his phone in the other, but he was not talking on the phone. He was talking to a man sitting in my favorite leather armchair. The man was slick. He wore a suit that was too shiny and shoes that were too pointed. He had the look of a reptile, a man who fed on desperation. His name was Julian, a real estate broker with a reputation for closing deals that other brokers wouldn't touch because they had too much conscience. Julian swirled his drink, looking at Terrence with boredom. "Terrence, sit down," Julian said, his voice like dry leaves scraping together. "You are making me dizzy. Look, I told you I have the buyer. The Omni Hotel Group is looking for a flagship property on the coast. They love the location. They love the architecture. They are ready to offer $45 million cash." 45. Terrence stopped pacing, his eyes wide. $45 million. "Julian, I thought you said 50. Market fluctuates." Julian shrugged, taking a sip. 45 is the offer. Take it or leave it. "But that is not the problem, Terrence. The problem is the title." Terrence wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, sweating profusely under the library lights. "The title is fine," Terrence lied quickly. Too quickly. "It is clean, is it?" Julian asked, raising an eyebrow. "Because my title search came up with a holding company, B. Freeman Holdings, LLC, and the signatory is a Bernard Freeman. Now, you told me you are the owner. I am," Terrence shouted, then lowered his voice, frantically checking the door. "I am practically the owner. B. Freeman is my uncle. My great-uncle, actually. He is 90 years old. Julian, he is in a hospice facility in Arizona. He doesn't know what day of the week it is. He gave me power of attorney years ago. He wants me to liquidate the estate to pay for his medical care." I stood in the hallway, clutching the handle of the trash cart. My knuckles turned white. "Uncle. Great-uncle hospice in Arizona." The lies tumbled out of his mouth so easily, so smoothly, that I wondered if he even knew what the truth was anymore. He was killing me off and reinventing me as a senile relative just to facilitate a sale. "And you have the paperwork?" Julian asked. "The power of attorney, the deed transfer." "I have it," Terrence said, tapping his breast pocket. "I have it all drafted. I just need to get the notary to stamp it on Monday, but we can sign the letter of intent tonight, right? We can get the deposit." Julian set his glass down on the mahogany table, completely ignoring the coaster I had placed there. "Terrence," Julian said, leaning forward. "Listen to me, I know about the audit." Terrence went still. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking like a wax figure. "What audit?" he whispered. "The audit at your firm," Julian said, smiling a cruel, thin smile. "Word gets around in this town. Terrence, you are the CFO of Horizon Realty. But the books are off, aren't they? About $3 million off. They say you have been borrowing from the escrow accounts to fund your lifestyle. The cars, the dinners, the wife's jewelry. Terrence collapsed onto the sofa, his head in his hands. It was a loan, Terrence choked out. I was going to pay it back. I just needed a lucky break. The market turned on me, Julian. I lost it all on those futures contracts. Now the auditors are coming on Tuesday. If I don't replace that money by Monday morning, I am going to prison. I felt a physical blow. To my chest, I had to lean against the wall to keep from sliding down to the floor. Prison. My son was not just a failure, he was a criminal. He had stolen from his clients. He had embezzled millions to pretend he was rich. And now he was trying to sell my house to cover his tracks. So that is the timeline, Julian said, standing up, buttoning his jacket. You need the deposit from the Omni Group to plug the hole in your company's account before the auditors arrive on Tuesday. You are desperate, Terrence. And desperate men make mistakes. I am not making a mistake, Terrence pleaded, looking up, tears in his eyes. This is a sure thing. Julian, my uncle is a vegetable. He will never know. The house sells. We get the cash. I pay back the firm and nobody gets hurt. You get a double commission. Julian, double 5% of $45 million. That is over $2 million for you, just for pushing the paper. Julian stopped. The greed in his eyes flared up, overriding his caution. $2 million was a lot of money. To look the other way. And you swear you have the signature? Julian asked. I will have it. Terrence promised. I will forge it tonight. I will have him sign it tonight. He is here. Here. Julian frowned. Yeah. Terrence laughed, a manic sound. He is working the bathroom. It is a cover C to keep him close. He is completely out of it, totally senile. I will get him to sign the deed, telling him it is a birthday card or something. He will do whatever I say. I closed my eyes. The betrayal was absolute. He was not just ashamed of me. He was planning to use my presence, my supposed senility, to rob me. He was going to trick me into selling my own home to save himself from the consequences of his own greed. Julian looked at Terrence with disgust and intrigue. All right, Julian said. Bring me the signed papers by tomorrow morning. If the signature looks good, I will push the letter of intent through and get the deposit wired to your personal account by Monday noon. But Terrence, if this goes south, I never saw you, I never heard of you. You are a lifesaver, Julian. Terrence gasped, pouring himself another drink, hands shaking violently. Thank you. You saved my life. I did not wait to hear. The rest, I turned the cart around slowly, ensuring the wheels did not squeak. I walked back down the hallway, my footsteps heavy but silent. I felt a coldness spreading through my body, numbing the pain, leaving only a crystal-clear clarity. I had spent my life building a foundation for my son, hoping he would build a structure upon it. Instead, he had taken a sledgehammer to the foundation and tried to sell the rubble. I pushed the cart into a small alcove near the kitchen entrance underneath a buzzing fluorescent light. I reached into the pocket of my stained polyester trousers and pulled out my phone. I did not call the police. Not yet. The police are a blunt instrument, and I needed a scalpel. I needed to cut the cancer out of my family with precision. I opened my secure messaging app and found the contact labeled Steinberg. Steinberg was not just a lawyer. He was a shark in a three-piece suit. He was the man I paid $10,000 a month to ensure that my empire was impenetrable. He was the only man who knew the full extent of my wealth and the full extent of my son's ignorance. I typed the message. My fingers were steady. My heart was stone. Message to Steinberg. Code red at the estate. Terrence is attempting to sell the property via fraud to cover embezzlement charges. He is forging my signature. Execute Phase 1 immediately. Freeze all accounts linked to the Freeman Trust. Flag his credit cards. Contact the auditors at Horizon Realty and send them the anonymous tip we discussed. And Steinberg, bring the papers. The real ones. Come to the gala now. I hit send. I watched the little check mark turn blue, indicating the message was read. A moment later, a reply appeared. Steinberg, understood, Mr. Freeman. I am 10 minutes away. I am 10. Do you want me to bring the police? I hesitated. I looked at the kitchen door where I was supposed to be washing dishes. I thought about the boy I taught to ride a bike. I thought about the man who just offered to sell me out for a commission. I typed back Bernard. No police yet. I want to look him in the eye when the lights go out. Just bring the file. I put the phone away. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of lemon detergent and betrayal. I pushed the cart back into the kitchen. The chef yelled at me for taking too long to empty the trash. "Move it, old man," the chef shouted. "The dessert rush is starting. We need those plates." I looked at the chef. I looked at the mountain of dirty dishes. I picked up a sponge. "I will wash them," I said softly. I washed them with a rhythm, scrub rinse, dry scrub rinse, dry. I was washing away the dirt, but in my mind I was washing away my son. I was scrubbing him out of my will, scrubbing him out of my trust, scrubbing him out of my life. He wanted to sell the house. He was about to find out that the house had teeth. The kitchen was a hot box of noise and steam, but out in the grand hall the temperature had just dropped 10 degrees, not because of the air conditioning, but because of the man who had just walked through the front door. I could see it happen through the small, circular window of the swinging service door. I was scrubbing a stubborn creme brulee dish, watching the reflection of the ballroom in a copper pot when the atmosphere shifted. The chatter stopped. The clinking of glasses paused. It was the kind of silence that usually accompanies a natural disaster or royalty. Arthur Steinberg had arrived. To the uninitiated. Arthur Steinberg looks like just another lawyer in a bespoke suit. He is 60 years old with silver hair combed back perfectly and eyes that are the color of cold steel. But to the people in that room, the people who play with millions and gamble with companies, Steinberg is a legend. He is not the lawyer you call when you want to write a will. He is the lawyer you call when you want to acquire a hostile nation or bury a scandal so deep it never sees the sun. He charges $2,000 an hour just to pick up the phone. And tonight he walked into my house looking like he owned the very air the guests were breathing. I watched my son Terrence react. It was pathetic, really. He had been holding court near the bar trying to impress a bored venture capitalist. But the moment he saw Steinberg, his eyes practically popped out of his head. He abandoned his guest mid-sentence and grabbed Brittany by the elbow, whispering frantically in her ear. "That is Arthur Steinberg," Terrence hissed. "I can read his lips even from 50 feet away. That is the shark. If we get him on our side, the auditors at Horizon Realty will run for the hills. He can fix everything." Brittany. Look at him. Brittany smoothed her wine-stained dress, her face lighting up with greed. She saw a lifeline. She saw a man who could make their legal troubles vanish with a single letter. They moved toward him. It was like watching two hyenas approach a lion, careful but desperate. "Mr. Steinberg," Terrence called out, putting on his most charming smile, extending a hand that was shaking slightly. "What an incredible surprise. We are so honored you could make it to the Sapphire Gala. I am Terrence Freeman, the host." Steinberg stopped. He didn't take the hand. He stood there in the center of the room, perfectly still, holding a slim leather briefcase and a garment bag slung over his shoulder. He looked at Terrence with an expression that was hard to read. It wasn't hate, it wasn't disgust. It was the look a scientist gives a bacteria sample under a microscope. "Mr. Freeman," Steinberg said, his voice deep and resonant, carrying effortlessly over the low music. "Yes, yes," Terrence said, eager, bobbing his head. "I am a huge admirer of your work. The merger you handled for TechCorp last year was brilliant. Simply brilliant. My wife Brittany and I would love to buy you a drink. We have a VIP lounge set up in the library, very private." Brittany stepped forward, flashing her teeth, trying to use her charm. "Please join us, Arthur," she purred, dropping the formal title, assuming a familiarity she hadn't earned. "We have so much to discuss. We are looking for new representation for our family trust, and we only want the best." Steinberg looked at Brittany. He looked at the purple wine stain on her white dress. He looked at the desperation in her eyes. "I am not here for a drink," Mrs. Freeman Steinberg said coldly, "and I am certainly not here to represent you. My client list is exclusive and currently full." Terrence's smile faltered. "Oh well, surely you can make an exception." Terrence stammered. "I mean, look around. This is the event of the season. I am aware of the event," Steinberg said, cutting him off. "I am here on business, urgent business with a very important client." Terrence looked around the room, hoping to spot a celebrity, hoping to latch on to whoever Steinberg was there to see. "A client," Terrence asked. "Is it David Chen? Is it Victoria?" Sterling Steinberg didn't answer. He simply adjusted his grip on the briefcase and walked past them. He didn't walk around them. He walked through them, forcing Terrence to step back, stumbling slightly, Steinberg moved with the momentum of a freight train heading straight for the back of the room, straight for the kitchen. Terrence and Brittany stood there confused, watching the most powerful lawyer in the city ignore the bar, ignore the billionaires, and march toward the service entrance. "Where is he going?" Brittany whispered. "Why is he going to the kitchen?" "Maybe he is lost," Terrence said. "Maybe he is looking for the coat check." Steinberg reached the double doors. He didn't hesitate. He pushed them open with one hand and stepped into the steam and the noise. The kitchen went silent. The chefs stopped chopping. The waiters stopped stacking plates. Everyone stared at the man in the $5,000 suit standing on the greasy tile floor. I didn't stop scrubbing. I kept my head down, focused on the pot in my hands, feeling the hot water burn my skin through the rubber gloves. Steinberg walked past the stunned head chef. He walked past the line cooks. He walked straight to the scullery area where the dishwashers worked. He stopped right behind me, Sir Steinberg said softly. His voice was stripped of all the arrogance he had shown my son. It was respectful, humble. Even I turned off the faucet. The sudden silence in the kitchen was deafening. I turned around slowly, wiping my gloved hands on my apron. "Hello, Arthur," I said. The staff gasped. The head chef dropped a ladle. Why was the old dishwasher calling the famous lawyer by his first name? Steinberg bowed his head slightly, a gesture of deference that would have made Terrence faint if he had seen it. "I apologize for the delay," Sir Steinberg said. "The traffic on the bridge was terrible. I have the documents you requested." He held up the briefcase. "Phase 1 is complete. The assets are frozen. The auditors have been notified, and the transfer of deed is ready for signature." I nodded, pulling off the rubber gloves with a wet snap. I tossed them onto the metal counter. "And the other matter?" I asked, looking at the garment bag over his shoulder. Steinberg smiled, a rare, genuine smile. "Tom Ford, sir, tailored to your exact measurements, just as you like it. I took the liberty of bringing the onyx cufflinks, the ones your wife gave you." I felt a lump in my throat. Steinberg knew me better than my own son did. He knew that tonight wasn't just about revenge. It was about dignity. "Thank you, Arthur," I said. "Do you want to change now, sir?" Steinberg asked. "The guests are waiting for the main event. The auction starts in 10 minutes. I looked down at my polyester vest, stained with dishwater and grease. I looked at my pants, which were too short. "Yes, Arthur," I said. It is time I stepped away from the sink, leaving the pile of dirty dishes for someone else for a change. "Come with me," I said. "We can use the manager's office." As we walked toward the office at the back of the kitchen, I saw a movement at the swinging doors. The small circular window was darkened by a face pressing against the glass. It was Brittany. She had followed him. She was spying, trying to figure out why the great Arthur Steinberg was talking to her father-in-law. I paused for a second, letting her see me, letting her see Steinberg standing next to me, listening intently to what I was saying. I knew exactly what she was thinking. She couldn't hear us through the heavy doors. She could only see the tableau, an old man in a dirty uniform pleading with a high-powered lawyer. She didn't see a billionaire giving orders. She saw a beggar asking for crumbs. I turned my back on the window and walked into the office, closing the door behind me. Outside in the hallway, Brittany pulled away from the window, a cruel smirk twisting her lips. She hurried back to the ballroom, finding Terrence near the bar, downing his third scotch. "You won't believe it," she giggled, clutching his arm. "I saw him." "Saw who?" Terrence asked, distracted, looking for a waiter. "Steinberg," Brittany said, laughing. "He went into the kitchen to talk to your dad." "My dad?" Terrence frowned. "Why would Arthur Steinberg talk to my dad?" Brittany rolled her eyes. "Because your dad is a leech, Terrence. I saw them. I saw the way Bernard was looking at him, all sad and pathetic. He was probably begging Steinberg for pro bono legal help, probably trying to get some advice on how to pay for that dress he ruined. Or maybe he is in trouble with the nursing home." Terrence snorted, shaking his head. "Of course," Terrence said, taking a swig of his drink. "Classic dad, always looking for a handout. He probably cornered Steinberg and gave him a sob story about being a poor retired janitor. God, it is so embarrassing. I hope Steinberg doesn't think we put him up to it." He definitely looked annoyed. Brittany lied. She hadn't seen annoyance, she had seen respect, but her brain couldn't process that image, so she rewrote it. He was holding his briefcase tight, probably. "Trying to get away," formed the old man, smelling like garbage water. Terrence sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I should go back there and kick him out," Terrence said. "I told him to stay in the bathroom. Now he is harassing my guests in the kitchen." "Leave him," Brittany said, pulling him back onto the dance floor. Let him beg. It is pathetic. Steinberg will just laugh at him and leave. Besides, we have bigger problems. We need to find the real owner of this house. We need to find B. Freeman before the night ends, or we are dead. Terrence nodded, straightening his tie. You are right. Let the old man rot in the kitchen. I have an empire to save. They turned away, dancing into the crowd, oblivious to the fact that the empire they were trying to save had already been foreclosed on. Inside the manager's office, the air was quiet. I stripped off the polyester vest, throwing it into the corner. It landed with a soft thud, a symbol of a life I was leaving behind. Steinberg unzipped the garment bag, revealing the tuxedo inside. It was midnight, blue silk, sleek and sharp. It looked like armor. I put on the shirt, crisp white cotton against my skin. I fastened the onyx cufflinks, thinking of Catherine, thinking of how much she would have loved to see this moment. Steinberg handed me the jacket. I slipped it on. It fit perfectly, hugging my shoulders, making me stand taller. I walked to the small mirror on the wall. The janitor was gone. Staring back at me was Bernard Freeman, the man who had built a fortune from nothing, the man who owned the ground beneath his feet. I turned to Steinberg. How do I look? Arthur, I asked. Steinberg checked his watch and smiled. You look like $50 million, sir. I straightened my cuffs. Good, I said. Let us go introduce ourselves. The spotlight was blinding white and hot, burning against my retinas like a supernova. It washed out the faces of the 300 guests, turning them into a faceless sea of diamonds and darkness. I stood center stage on the raised platform of the Grand Hall, a place usually reserved for string quartets and speeches about saving the rainforests. But tonight it was a scaffold, and I was the prisoner being paraded before the execution. My son Terrence stood next to me holding a microphone, his face glistening with sweat and manic energy. He had his arm draped around my shoulders, but it did not feel like a hug. It felt like a clamp, a restraint to keep me from running away. He was squeezing my biceps so hard I could feel his fingernails digging into the cheap fabric of my polyester vest. Ladies and gentlemen, Terrence boomed his voice, echoing off the vaulted ceilings, dazzling the room with his smile. We have a very special last-minute addition to the auction block tonight, a surprise item that is. Near and dear to my heart. He paused for effect, looking out at the crowd. We have auctioned off vintage wines and vacations to the Maldives. Terrence continued, but this next item is about service. It is about humility. I stood there clutching the handle of a dirty mop. Terrence had shoved it into my hands moments before dragging me up the stairs, claiming it was a prop for a skit. I looked down at the gray strings of the mop head stained with the red wine I had cleaned up earlier. It was damp and heavy. This is my father, Bernard, Terrence announced, gesturing to me with a flourish. A few people clapped politely, mostly out of confusion. They looked at my gray slacks that were too short, my scuffed work boots and the stain on my vest. They looked at the mop. They did not know how to react. My dad is a simple man, Terrence said, his voice taking on a patronizing tone that made my stomach turn. He has spent his entire life making things shine. He was a janitor for 40 years, folks. 40 years of scrubbing toilets and waxing floors so that important people could do important work. Brittany was in the front row, laughing softly, covering her mouth with a napkin. She knew what was coming. She was enjoying the show. Now my dad here is retired, Terrence went on, but he gets bored easily. He misses the smell of lemon pledge and the satisfaction of a clean bowl. So in the spirit of charity, we are auctioning off his services for 1 week. The room went deadly silent. The billionaires, the tech moguls, the socialites, they all stared up at us, uncomfortable shifts in seats. The air grew heavy. That is right, Terrence shouted, oblivious to the tension or perhaps fueling it. 1 week of personal cleaning services from Bernard Freeman. He will come to your house, he will scrub your floors, he will detail your cars, and he will do it with the smile of a man who knows his place. All proceeds go to the foundation. Of course. He turned to look at me, grinning like a shark. What do you say, Dad? Ready to come out of retirement for a good cause. He didn't wait for me to answer. He turned back to the crowd. Do I hear $500 for a week of the best janitorial work in the city? $500 to have your own personal, old-fashioned handyman. Silence. Nobody raised a paddle. David Chen, the tech billionaire, was sitting near the front. He looked at Terrence with an expression of pure disgust. He looked at me with something else, curiosity perhaps, or pity. Terrence's smile faltered. The sweat on his brow increased. "Come on, folks," Terrence said, laughing nervously. "It is for charity. Look at him. He loves to work. It gives him purpose. Don't you, Dad?" He shook my shoulder roughly. I stood perfectly still. I looked at the crowd. I looked at the faces of the people who thought they owned the world. I looked at my son who thought he owned me. I gripped the mop handle tighter. The wood was smooth, worn down by years of use. It was a tool of labor. Yes. But in that moment, it felt like a staff of office, a scepter of a king in exile. Terrence was dying up there. The silence was stretching out, becoming painful. He needed a bid. He needed validation. Okay, Terrence stammered. Tough crowd. How about $200? $200 to have my dad clean your garage. He is great at organizing junk. Still silence. Then a voice called out from the back near the bar. I will give you $100. It was Brad, the college buddy who had tripped me earlier, the man who had caused the wine spill. He walked forward, swirling a drink in his glass, a cruel smirk on his face. $100, Brad repeated loudly, walking toward the stage. But he has to wear that vest, and he has to clean my frat house mess. I had a party last night, and the bathroom is a disaster. The crowd chuckled nervously, breaking the tension. It was a low, mean sound, the sound of a mob deciding to join in the bullying rather than stop it. Sold, Terrence shouted instantly, relieved to have any bid at all. Sold to Brad for $100, Terrence laughed, wiping his forehead. There you go, Dad. You are booked. You are worth a whole Benjamin. Brad reached into his pocket. He pulled out a crumpled $100 bill. He balled it up in his fist. Catch, old man, Brad yelled. He threw the money. The ball of green paper sailed through the air, arching over the heads of the front row. It hit me square in the chest. It didn't hurt physically. It was just paper. But the symbolism hit me with the force of a wrecking ball. The bill bounced off my vest and landed on the stage at my feet, right next to the dirty mop. The crowd roared with laughter. It was open now. Raucous laughter. Mockery directed at the old man being treated like a stripper in a dive bar. Brittany was clapping, cheering Brad on. Pick it up, Brad shouted. Clean up on aisle 5. Terrence looked at the money on the floor, then at me. Go on, Dad, Terrence whispered, his mic lowered. Pick it up. It is for the fund. Don't be proud. I looked at the crumpled bill. I looked at the mop. I remembered the days I spent working double shifts when Terrence was a baby. I remembered coming home with aching back and blistered hands smelling of bleach just so I could put $50 into his college fund. I remembered the pride I felt when he graduated, the hope I had that he would be a better man than me. That hope died right there on the stage. It shriveled up and turned to dust, blown away by the laughter of the elite. I let go of the mop. It clattered to the floor with a loud wooden crack. The sound cut through the laughter, silencing the front row. I looked down at the mop laying there like a fallen soldier. Then I looked at the money. I did not bend down. I slowly lifted my head. I straightened my spine. The stoop of the tired old janitor vanished. My shoulders went back. My chin went up. I looked out at the room, not from the bottom of a well, but from the top of a mountain. I reached out and took the microphone from Terrence's hand. He was so surprised he let go without a fight. Dad, what are you doing? Terrence hissed. Step back. I ignored him. I held the microphone to my lips. The feedback whined for a split second, a sharp, piercing noise that silenced the back of the room. I looked directly at Brad, the young man who had thrown the money. $100, I said. My voice was not the shaky rasp of an old man. It was deep resonant, the voice of authority, the voice that had commanded boardrooms in silence for decades. You bid $100 for my time, I continued, my eyes boring into him. Brad stopped smiling. He lowered his drink, looking confused. And you? I turned to Terrence, looking him dead in the eye. You sold your father's dignity for $100. Terrence took a step back, unsettled by the change in my demeanor. Dad, stop it. You are embarrassing me. No, son, I said, my voice booming through the speakers, filling the grand hall, rattling the crystals in the chandeliers. I am not embarrassing you. I am appraising you. I kicked the crumpled bill off the stage with the toe of my boot. It fluttered down, landing near Brittany's feet. You think $100 is a lot of money, I said, looking out at the crowd. You think because I hold a mop, I am worth less than the shoes you are wearing. I walked to the edge of the stage, looking down at them. Let me tell you something about value. I said, value is not what you have in the bank. Value is what you build with your hands. Value is how you treat the people who clean up your mess. I pointed at the mop on the floor. I pushed that mop for 40 years, I said, and I pushed it with pride because it meant my son would never have to. But tonight, I see that I pushed it in vain, because while I was cleaning floors, I forgot to teach my son how to be a man. The room was deathly quiet. You could hear a pin drop. David Chen was leaning forward in his seat, his eyes locked on me. Victoria. Sterling had put down her glass. Terrence tried to grab the mic back. Okay, that is enough. Dad, give me that. I pulled away easily, creating distance. I am not. Done, I thundered. You wanted to auction me off, Terrence. You wanted to sell my time. Well, my time is up. I turned to the wings of the stage where the shadows were deepest. Mr. Steinberg, I called out. Arthur Steinberg. Stepped out from the darkness. He was holding the garment bag and the briefcase. He walked onto the stage, stopping next to me. He looked at Terrence with a cold, professional indifference. I handed the microphone to Steinberg. Hold. This. Arthur, I said. I unbuttoned the polyester vest. The cheap plastic buttons popped off, bouncing on the floor. I tore it off, revealing the white undershirt beneath. I unbuckled the belt of the oversized slacks. I stepped out of the janitor's uniform right there on the stage, leaving it in a pile next to the mop. I stood there in my underwear and undershirt for a brief second, vulnerable yet powerful. Then Steinberg handed me the midnight blue tuxedo jacket. I slipped it on. I pulled the trousers from the bag and stepped into them, zipping them up with a sharp, fluid motion. I adjusted the onyx cufflinks. I tied the bow tie, watching Terrence's face transform from annoyance to confusion to absolute terror. I ran a hand through my gray hair, smoothing it back. I took the microphone back from Steinberg. I turned to face the crowd again. $100, I repeated softly. I reached into the inside pocket of my new tuxedo and pulled out a wallet. I extracted a crisp bill. It wasn't $100. It was a $1,000 bill, a rare collectible. I kept for luck. I tossed it at Brad. Keep your money, son, I said. You are going to need it for the dry cleaning. Then I turned to Terrence. You wanted to know who owns this house, I asked. I spread my arms wide, encompassing the chandeliers, the marble, the gold, the entire $50 million estate. You are looking at him. The silence that followed my declaration was heavy, but it was also fragile. It was the kind of silence that exists right before a dam breaks. My son. Terrence stood just 3 feet away from me on the stage, his face twisted in a mixture of confusion and pity. He looked at my new tuxedo. He looked at the confident way I stood, but his mind simply refused to accept the data. It was a cognitive dissonance so strong it was almost visible. He could not reconcile the father he had mocked for 30 years with the man claiming to own the $50 million ceiling above his head. Terrence let out a short, sharp laugh. It was a brittle sound like stepping on dry twigs. Okay, Dad, he said, shaking his head, his voice amplified by the microphone he was still clutching. That is a good one, seriously, that is hilarious. You own the house, right? And I am the King of France. He turned to the crowd, spreading his arms wide, trying to rope them into his denial. Give it up for Bernard Freeman, everyone, Terrence shouted, trying to turn my moment of truth into a comedy routine. The man has a great imagination. See, this is what happens when you inhale too many cleaning fumes. You start hallucinating that you are a billionaire. The crowd chuckled nervously. They wanted to believe Terrence because believing him was easier than accepting that they had just thrown trash at a tycoon. But David Chen in the front row was not laughing. He was staring at me with intense calculation. Terrence turned back to me, his smile dropping instantly, replaced by a sneer. Now get off the stage, Dad, Terrence hissed, covering the mic with his hand. You have had your fun. You played dress-up with Steinberg's spare suit, but the joke is over. Go back to the kitchen before I have security throw you out. I looked at him. I looked at the utter lack of respect, the absolute blindness of his arrogance. He was standing on a trapdoor and he was jumping up and down. I reached into the pocket of my tuxedo trousers. I pulled out my old smartphone, the one with the cracked screen held together by duct tape. Terrence saw it and rolled his eyes. What are you going to do? Call the nursing home? Terrence mocked. No, son, I said, my voice calm, steady, cutting through the air. I am calling the house. I pressed a single icon on the screen. It was a red button labeled Omega. The reaction was instantaneous. Bam! It sounded like a thunderclap inside the walls. The heavy magnetic breakers in the basement tripped in perfect synchronization. The sound was physical, a deep thud that vibrated through the floorboards, up through the soles of everyone's shoes. Then the world ended. The 3 massive crystal chandeliers overhead flickered once and died. The wall sconces went black. The stage lights vanished. The music, which had been a soft background hum, cut out abruptly with a dying electronic whine. Total, absolute darkness swallowed the grand hall. For a heartbeat, there was silence. The kind of silence that comes from pure shock. Then the panic set in. Screams erupted from the darkness. They were not the screams of people in mortal danger. They were the screams of people who had never experienced a moment of uncontrolled environment in their lives. Rich people do not do well in the dark. They are used to generators. They are used to backup systems. They are used to the world bending to their will. But tonight, the world was bending to mine. I stood perfectly still on the stage. I did not need to see. I knew this room. I knew that the edge of the stage was 4 feet to my left. I knew that the stairs were 3 feet behind me. I had walked this floor plan in my mind 1,000 times before the first brick was laid. Overhead, the clouds outside shifted, and a pale, ghostly beam of moonlight filtered through the massive glass dome in the center of the ceiling. It was faint, just enough to turn the guests into moving shadows, silver ghosts bumping into each other. "Ouch! Watch where you are going!" someone yelled. "My dress! You stepped on my dress!" Brittany shrieked, her voice piercing the gloom. Then came Terrence's voice, panicked and angry. "What is going on?" he screamed into the darkness. "Where is the backup power? Turn the lights on. Somebody turn the damn lights on." I heard him fumbling for his walkie-talkie, the one he used, to bark orders at the catering staff. Manager, come in," Terrence yelled. The radio squawked with static. "Hello, is anyone there? I am paying $100,000 for this venue, and I am standing in the pitch black. Fix it. Fix it now, or I will sue you into oblivion." I stood in the dark, smiling. "You cannot sue the landlord for evicting a squatter, Terrence," I whispered. Suddenly a sound filled the room, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. It was the house's internal address system. A state-of-the-art setup hidden within the walls, usually used for soft ambient music. But tonight I had programmed it for something else. A voice spoke. It was a synthesized voice. Cool, robotic, and completely without mercy. System alert. The guests froze. The screams died down, replaced by a terrified hush. "System alert." The voice repeated, echoing off the marble. "Unauthorized occupancy detected. Contract violation in progress." Terrence was tapping his radio frantically. "What is that?" he shouted. "Who is doing that? Shut it off." The voice continued, ignoring him. "User Terrence Freeman has violated the terms of Service Clause 4, Section 1, disrespect of the owner and failure to recognize authority." A murmur ran through the crowd. "Disrespect of the owner. What kind of security system was this? Initiating lockdown protocol," the voice boomed. "Security teams have been notified. Prepare for immediate eviction." "Eviction," Terrence screamed. "You can't evict me. I have a contract. I have a receipt." I tapped the screen of my phone again, scrolling to the next command. I could hear Brittany sobbing somewhere near the front row. "My bag," she cried. "I can't find my bag. It has my diamonds in it. Someone stole my diamonds." "Nobody stole your diamonds, Brittany," I thought. I thought. "Can't find them because you never learned to see in the dark." I looked out at the chaos. It was a beautiful disaster. The social climbers, the sycophants, the parasites. They were all reduced to frightened children huddled together in the moonlight, stripped of their pretense. Terrence was still screaming, trying to assert control over a situation that had spiraled completely out of his grasp. "Everyone, stay calm," he shouted, his voice cracking. "I am sure it is just a fuse. We will have the power back on in a second. I am going to find the breaker box." "You won't find it," I said, my voice projecting into the darkness. Terrence stopped. "Dad, is that you?" he asked into the black void. "Yes, son," I said. "Did you do this?" Terrence demanded. "Did you trip a wire or something with that mop? You broke the electricity, didn't you? You clumsy old fool." I shook my head, even though he couldn't see me. "I didn't break it. Terrence, I turned it off." You turned it off. Terrence laughed, a hysterical edge to his voice. You turned off a $50 million smart home with what, a flip phone? You are delusional. Dad, stop playing games and help me find the manager I am. The manager, I said. And then I pressed the final button. The sound of heavy mechanical gears engaging filled the room. It came from the ceiling high above the stage. Click, clack, thud. Suddenly a beam of light cut through the darkness. It was not the warm glow of the chandeliers. It was a harsh, blinding white spotlight, a theater spot usually reserved for soloists. It hit the stage with physical force, but it didn't hit me. It hit Terrence. He gasped, shielding his eyes against the sudden glare. He was illuminated like a criminal in an interrogation room. The light was unforgiving. It showed the sweat dripping down his face. It showed the terror in his eyes. It showed the stain on his tuxedo where he had spilled his drink. Another spotlight clicked on. This one hit Brittany in the front row. She screamed, trying to cover her face, trying to hide the wine-stained dress, trying to hide the ruin of her perfection. And then a third light. This one was different. It was softer, warmer, a golden hue. It clicked on directly above me. I stood there in my midnight blue tuxedo, the onyx cufflinks glinting in the light. I was not squinting. I was looking straight ahead, calm, composed, and utterly in control. The contrast was stark. On one side, the panicked, sweaty son and his disheveled wife. On the other, the calm, dignified father standing tall. The crowd gasped. They saw it. They finally saw it. It wasn't just a change of clothes. It was a change of presence. The janitor had vanished, replaced by the patriarch. Terrence lowered his hand, blinking rapidly, looking at me across the stage. The distance between us was only a few feet, but in that moment it felt like an ocean. "Dad," Terrence whispered, "why are the lights on you?" "Because I hold the remote." "Terrence," I said, holding up the phone. I took a step forward into the pool of light. "You asked for the owner," I said, my voice calm. "But carrying to the back of the room. You insulted the janitor because you thought he was beneath you. You laughed at the man who cleans the floors because you thought dirt was a sign of failure. I gestured to the house around us. But who do you think built this, Terrence? Who do you think laid the foundation? Who do you think wired the electricity you are so desperate for? Who do you think paid for the marble you are standing on?" Terrence shook his head, backing away. "No," he said. "No, it is impossible. You are broke. You drive a Ford. I drive a Ford because I choose to," I said. "I live simply because I know the value of $1. But make no mistake, son." I took another step. The spotlight following me. "I am B. Freeman." The crowd erupted into whispers. The name rippled through the room like a shockwave. B. Freeman. It was him. It was the old man. Terrence looked at the crowd, then back at me. He looked like a man watching his world burn down. "This is a trick," he stammered. "It is a prank Steinberg put you up to." This I looked at Steinberg, who was standing in the wings, visible now in the spill of the light. Steinberg nodded once, confirming everything. "It is no trick, Terrence," I said. "And now that I have your attention, I think it is time we discuss the rent." I looked at the screen of my phone. There was one more notification pending. It was a text from the security gate. Message from Wallace. "The auditors have arrived, sir. Shall I send them in?" I smiled. "Send them in," I whispered. I looked at Terrence. "You might want to fix your tie, son," I said. "You are about to have company." The spotlight cut through the darkness of the grand hall like a laser beam, isolating me on the stage. It was a circle of pure white light in a sea of shadows, and for a moment the only sound in the cavernous room was the hum of the ventilation system kicking back into life. I stood there in the center of the beam, feeling the heat of it on my face, feeling the eyes of 500 people boring into me. They were waiting for the punchline. They were waiting for the old janitor to trip over his own feet or drop the microphone or apologize for interrupting their evening of excess. But the punchline never came. From the wings of the stage, a shadow detached itself from the darkness. It moved with the precision of a Swiss watch and the silent authority of a predator. It was Arthur Steinberg. He walked into the pool of light, his polished dress shoes making a sharp rhythmic click on the hardwood floor. He was carrying a garment bag made of heavy black canvas, stamped with a gold logo that only the very wealthy would recognize. It was not a rental bag. It was the kind of bag that travels on private jets and hangs in closets made of cedar and glass. Steinberg stopped next to me. He did not look at the crowd. He did not look at Terrence, who was standing 5 feet away with his mouth open catching flies. He looked only at me with the deference of a lieutenant addressing his general. "I believe you are out of uniform, sir," Steinberg said, his voice low but magnified by the acoustics of the room. I looked down at myself. I looked at the gray polyester vest that was too tight across the chest, stained with the sweat of a hard night's work, and the red wine that my daughter-in-law had spilled. I looked at the cheap plastic name tag that read Bernard Temp Staff, pinned crookedly to the lapel. It was the costume of a ghost, the uniform of a man who was meant to be invisible. "You are right, Arthur," I said. My voice was steady, calm, louder than it had any right to be. "I am wearing the wrong clothes." Steinberg unzipped the heavy canvas bag. The sound of the zipper was a long tear in the silence, startling the front row. He reached inside and pulled out a jacket. It was midnight blue, a shade so dark it was almost black, but under the stage lights it shimmered with an inner fire. It was silk and wool, a blend woven in a mill in Italy that had been closed for 20 years. It was a Tom Ford tuxedo jacket, bespoke cut to fit my shoulders to the millimeter. Steinberg held it up. It hung from his hands like a royal robe. "May I, sir?" Steinberg asked. I nodded. I reached up and unbuttoned the cheap plastic buttons of the waiter's vest. Pop, pop, pop. They came undone, easily, flimsy and weak. I shrugged the vest off my shoulders, letting it slide down my arms. It hit the floor with a soft, wet slap, landing right next to the dirty mop bucket. It looked like a dead animal, a shed skin that I had outgrown. A collective gasp went through the room. It wasn't a gasp of scandal, it was a gasp of realization. Underneath the vest, I was wearing a white dress shirt. It was rumpled and the sleeves were rolled up, but the quality of the cotton was undeniable. It was my own shirt, the one I had worn under the uniform, the one rebellion I had allowed myself. Steinberg stepped forward. He held the tuxedo jacket open. I slipped my arms into the silk-lined sleeves. The fabric was cool and smooth, sliding over my skin like water. I pulled it onto my shoulders, and Steinberg adjusted the collar with a quick professional tug. It settled onto my frame perfectly, hugging my torso without restricting my movement. It was armor. It was power. I fastened the single button at the waist, instantly transforming my silhouette. The stoop of the janitor vanished. The hunched shoulders of the tired old man straightened. I stood at my full height, 6'2", a height I hadn't used in years because I was always trying to make myself smaller for my son. Steinberg reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He opened it, revealing 2 cufflinks. Black onyx set in platinum, simple, understated, and worth more than the car Terrence drove. "Your cufflinks, sir," Steinberg said, handing them to me. I took them. My fingers did not shake. I rolled down my cuffs, fastening the platinum links through the buttonholes. They clicked into place with a satisfying snap. Click, click. I shot my cuffs, ensuring a 1/4 inch of white linen showed beneath the midnight blue wool. I ran a hand over the lapel, smoothing a microscopic wrinkle. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of the new suit, the scent of victory. I looked up. The transformation was complete. The old man who smelled of bleach and cabbage was gone. Standing in the spotlight was Bernard Freeman, the man who had bought his first stock at 22, the man who had seen the dot-com bubble coming before anyone else, the man who owned the very ground these people were standing on. I turned my gaze to the crowd. They were staring at me with a mixture of shock and awe. It is amazing how much clothes make the man. 5 minutes ago, they saw a servant worthy of ridicule. Now they saw a titan. Victoria Sterling, the Queen of New York. Real estate had stood up in the front row. She was squinting at me, her hand over her mouth, her eyes wide with recognition. She knew that suit. She knew that posture. She knew that only a man with absolute confidence would change his clothes on stage in the middle of a gala. Then I turned to Terrence. My son was frozen. He looked like a statue of disbelief crumbling into dust. He was staring at the tuxedo, then at the dirty vest on the floor, then back at me. His brain was misfiring, trying to process the data. The suit was too expensive. The fit was too perfect. The cufflinks were too real. It didn't match the narrative he had built in his head. It didn't match the story of the loser father. "Dad," Terrence stammered, his voice cracking into a high pitch. He took a step forward, his hand reaching out as if to touch the fabric to prove it was a hallucination. Dad, where did you... Dad, where? Get that. I looked at him calmly, adjusting my tie. Get what, Terrence? I asked. That suit, Terrence shouted, pointing a shaking finger at my chest. That is a Tom Ford. That is a $5,000 suit. You can't afford that. You can't even afford rent. Where did you get it? Did you steal it? The accusation hung in the air, ugly and desperate. Did you steal it from the coat check? Terrence yelled, looking around frantically for security. Did you take it from one of the guests? Is that why Steinberg is here? Is he your public defender? Did you rob someone? Dad, take it off right now before the police come. You are making it worse. I laughed. It was a low, dry sound, devoid of humor. Steal it, I repeated. I looked at Steinberg. Arthur. My son thinks I am a thief. Steinberg stepped forward, his face a mask of cold professional disdain. Mr. Terrence Freeman, Steinberg said, his voice slicing through the air like a scalpel. This suit was commissioned by your father 3 months ago. It was tailored in Milan and flown here specifically for this evening. The receipt is in my briefcase along with the deed to this property. Terrence blinked rapidly, his face pale. Commissioned, he whispered. But he is broke. He drives a Ford truck. I took a step toward my son. The spotlight followed me, casting my shadow long and dark over him. I drive a Ford because it is reliable, Terrence, I said. My voice was not the voice of a father scolding a child. It was the voice of a CEO firing an incompetent employee. I live in a small house because I do not need 50 rooms to feel important. I have spent my life building wealth, not flashing it. I reached out and brushed a speck of invisible dust from Terrence's lapel. He flinched as if I had burned him. You see a suit, and you think wealth, I said. You see a uniform, and you think poverty. That is why you are drowning, son. You look at the price tag and you miss the value. I stole nothing, I continued, my eyes locking onto his, holding him in place. But you, Terrence, you have been stealing from, and me for years. You stole my patience. You stole my benefit of the doubt, and tonight you tried to steal my dignity. I gestured to the dirty vest on the floor. You wanted a janitor, I said quietly. So I played the janitor, but the play is over. I turned back to the crowd, raising my voice so every person in the hall could hear me. My name is Bernard Freeman. I am the majority shareholder of Tech Corp. I am the founder of the Freeman Trust, and I am the sole owner of this estate. A gasp rippled through the room, louder this time. David Chen began to clap, a slow, rhythmic applause that started alone and then began to spread. Terrence looked at the clapping billionaire. He looked at me. No, he whispered, shaking his head, backing away until he hit the edge of the piano. No, this is a prank. It has to be a prank. You are lying. You are just a crazy old man. I looked at Steinberg. Show him Arthur, I said. Steinberg opened the briefcase on the piano bench. He pulled out a single document, a deed stamped with the official seal of the county clerk. He held it up in the spotlight. The name on the deed was clear, even from a distance. Bernard Freeman. Terrence stared at the paper. The color drained from his face completely. He looked like he was going to be sick. I buttoned my jacket. Now I said, checking my watch. If you are quite finished insulting the host, I believe we have some business to discuss regarding the rental fee you haven't paid. I looked at Terrence with a shark smile, and the dress you owe me for. The sound of one pair of hands clapping is a lonely thing, but the sound of 300 pairs of hands clapping in unison is a thunderstorm. It started with David Chen, the tech billionaire in the front row. He stood up slowly, buttoning his tuxedo jacket, his face split in a wide grin of genuine delight. He looked at me up on the stage, not as a servant but as an equal, perhaps even a superior. Then Victoria Sterling stood up, her diamonds catching the light, followed by the hedge fund managers, the venture capitalists, and the titans of industry. Bravo. Bernie David Chen shouted, his voice booming over the applause. Bravo, you old fox. I knew you would come out of the woodwork eventually. Welcome back to the land of the living. Mr. Freeman, Victoria called out, raising her glass. The applause swelled, filling the grand hall, bouncing off the marble floors and the vaulted ceiling. It was a wave of validation that washed over me. Cleansing the last 40 years of invisibility, I stood there in my Tom Ford tuxedo, feeling the fabric settle on my shoulders, accepting the ovation with a small nod. But amidst the thunderous applause, there was a screech, a high-pitched sound of tearing metal. "Stop it! Stop it, right now!" Brittany pushed her way through the crowd, shoving a waiter aside, nearly knocking over a tray of empty glasses. She marched toward the stage, her wine-stained dress trailing behind her like a bloody shroud. Her hair was coming undone. Her face was twisted in a mask of pure, unadulterated panic. She looked like a woman watching her reality shatter and trying to hold the pieces together with sheer volume. "Are you all crazy?" she screamed, spinning around to face the guests, pointing a shaking finger at David Chen. "You are clapping for him. You are clapping for the help. He is a janitor. You idiots, he is a janitor." The room went quiet, not out of respect, but out of shock. The guests looked at her with the kind of embarrassment usually reserved for a drunk relative at a funeral. Brittany turned back. To me, her eyes wild. "Tell them, Bernard," she shrieked. "Tell them the truth. Stop lying to these people. You scrub toilets for a living. You live in a rental shack. You drive a truck that barely runs. You are a fraud. You are conning everyone just like you conned us into letting you in here." She turned to Terrence, grabbing his lapels, shaking him. "Terrence, do something. Tell them. He is having a psychotic break. He thinks he is rich. Call the police. Arrest him for impersonating a billionaire." Terrence stood there paralyzed. He looked at the deed in Steinberg's hand. He looked at the suit I was wearing. He looked at the billionaires who were treating me like royalty. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. I stepped forward to the edge of the stage. I did not shout. I did not need to. The microphone was in my hand and the room was listening. I waited for Brittany to stop, hyperventilating. I looked down at her calmly. "You are right, Brittany," I said. She froze, a triumphant sneer beginning to form on her lips. "See," she yelled. "See, I told you." "He admits it. I am a janitor." I continued, my voice steady, hard as granite. "I was a janitor for 40 years. I started in 1980 at a small company called TechCorp, back when they were working out of a garage in Palo Alto. I swept the floors, I took out the trash, I cleaned the bathrooms after the engineers went home. I walked across the stage, pacing slowly like a panther. But I did something else too. Brittany, I listened. I stopped looking directly at David Chen. When the engineers were arguing about microchips at 2 a.m, I was there mopping the hallway. When the board members were discussing the IPO in the conference room, I was there emptying the wastebaskets. I was the invisible man, the furniture, the ghost in the machine. Nobody pays attention to the janitor. Nobody lowers their voice when the cleaning guy walks in. I smiled a dry, humorless smile. So I heard everything I knew, which products were going to change the world and which ones were going to fail. And every month when I got my paycheck, I did not buy a new car. I did not buy fancy clothes. I did not buy a big house to impress my neighbors. I lived on rice and beans. I walked to work, I wore secondhand clothes, and I took every single dollar I saved and I bought stock. I looked at Terrence. I bought TechCorp stock when it was $5 a share. I bought it when everyone said computers were a fad. I bought it when the market crashed in '87 and everyone was selling in a panic. I kept buying. I reinvested the dividends. I lived like a pauper so I could invest like a king. I turned to Steinberg. "Arthur, would you please inform my son of my current standing?" Steinberg stepped into the light, adjusting his glasses. "Mr. Bernard Freeman is currently the third largest individual shareholder of TechCorp," Steinberg announced, his voice ringing with authority. His portfolio also includes significant holdings in real estate, renewable energy, and municipal bonds. The estimated value of his liquid assets exceeds $900 million. The number hung in the air. $900 million. Brittany made a sound like a dying cat. She grabbed the edge of the stage to keep from falling over. $900 million, she whispered. Her eyes rolled back in her head, momentarily overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of the wealth she had mocked. I looked at her with pity. "So yes, Brittany," I said, "I am a janitor. But I am also the man who owns the company you work for, or rather, the company you used to work for before they fired you last week for incompetence." Brittany gasped, clutching her chest. "How did you know that?" she stammered. "I know everything," I said. "I own the holding company that owns the staffing agency you pretended to work at. I know about the fake sick days. I know about the stolen office supplies. And I know about the debt." I turned my attention to Terrence. My son was shaking so hard his teeth were chattering. "Dad, Terrence whispered, tears streaming down his face. Why didn't you tell me? Why did you let me struggle? Why did you let me live in debt when you had all this? I felt a flash of anger, hot and righteous. Let you struggle, I asked incredulously. I paid for your college, Terrence. I paid for your wedding. I paid for the down payment on your condo. I gave you a debt-free start in life that most men would kill for. And what did you do with it? I pointed the microphone at him like a weapon. You bought a leased Ferrari. You bought designer suits. You spent money. You didn't have to impress people you didn't like. You looked down on me because my hands were dirty, never realizing that dirt is where the gold is buried. I walked to the very edge of the stage, towering over him. And you asked about this house? Terrence looked up at the ceiling at the chandeliers he had bragged about, at the marble walls he had claimed were his. You rented the Freeman estate, I said. You paid $100,000 to a shell company to host your party here. You bragged to your friends that the owner was some mysterious tycoon named B. Freeman. I laughed. It was a harsh sound. You were right about one thing, Terrence. The owner is B. Freeman. I spread my arms wide, encompassing the entire $50 million property. Bernard Freeman. I bought this land 20 years ago when it was just rock and weeds. I planted the trees you drove past tonight. I designed the library where you tried to commit fraud. I chose the marble in the bathroom where you made me stand and hand out towels. I looked at Brittany. You told me to park my truck by the dumpsters because it was an eyesore. You told me to use the service entrance because I wasn't good enough for the front door. I stepped down from the stage, walking down the stairs one by one until I was standing right in front of them. But this is my house, I said. My voice dropped dead quiet. This is my floor. This is my roof. And this is my carpet. I looked down at Brittany's muddy shoes, the ones she had ruined. Walking through the garden because she refused to park in the guest lot. You are standing on my Persian rug with dirty shoes, I said, and you, Terrence, you are drinking my vintage wine without asking. I plucked the glass of champagne from Terrence's trembling hand. I poured it out onto the floor right between his polished shoes. Splash. The liquid soaked into the carpet, a dark stain spreading slowly. You called me a guest in my own home, I said. You treated the owner like a servant. Well, the servant is resigning, Terrence, and the landlord is taking over. I turned to the security team who were waiting in the wings, led by Marcus, I said. Yes, Mr. Freeman. Marcus boomed, stepping forward, his hand on his belt. Please escort these trespassers off the property immediately. Terrence's eyes went wide. Trespassers, he shrieked. You can't do that. We have a contract. We paid the rental fee. I looked at Steinberg. Arthur, the contract. Steinberg opened his briefcase and pulled out a single sheet of paper, ripped it in half. The sound was loud and final. Violation of terms. Steinberg said, calm as a glacier. The contract is null and void due to gross misconduct and attempted fraud. The rental fee is forfeited. I looked back at Terrence. You have 5 minutes to vacate the premises, I said. And Terrence? He looked at me. Hope gone, replaced by terror. Take your wife with you, I said, and do not forget to wipe your feet on the way out. I turned my back on them, walking toward the crowd of billionaires who were watching in silent awe. David Chen clapped me on the shoulder as I passed. That was better than a board meeting, Bernie, Chen whispered. I smiled, adjusting my cuffs. The meeting is just beginning, David, I said. Now is go find some real wine. This stuff they are drinking is swill. The applause for my revelation had barely faded into the corners of the grand hall when Terrence made one last desperate attempt to regain control of the narrative. He was like a captain on a sinking ship trying to order the ocean to stop moving. He scrambled back to the center of the stage, his face slick with sweat, his eyes darting frantically between me and the crowd of billionaires he was trying to swindle. He grabbed the remote control for the presentation screen from the podium, his hand shaking so badly he nearly dropped it. Ladies and gentlemen, Terrence shouted, his voice cracking with artificial enthusiasm. Please let us focus on why we are really here. Tonight is about the future. It is about vision. My father likes to tell stories, but numbers do not lie. I have prepared a presentation that will explain everything. It will show you the investment opportunity of a lifetime. The Sapphire Resort Project. He pointed the remote at the massive white screen that descended from the ceiling. Behind us. Ignore the old man, Terrence yelled, desperation seeping into every syllable. Look at the screen. Look at the future. He pressed the button. The projector hummed to life. A beam of blue light cut through the air, hitting the canvas with crystal clarity. But it was not a rendering of a luxury resort that appeared. It was not a graph showing projected profits. It was a spreadsheet, a black background with rows and rows of angry red numbers. It was the internal ledger of Horizon Realty, the confidential file that Steinberg had subpoenaed just hours ago. The room went dead silent again. But this time it was not the silence of awe. It was the silence of a car crash. The guests squinted, trying to read the text. And as they read, a collective gasp rippled through the room, starting from the front row and washing all the way to the back. Terrence froze. He looked over his shoulder, expecting to see his beautiful architectural drawings. Instead, he saw his own financial autopsy projected 20 feet high for the entire world to see. "What is this?" Terrence whispered, hitting the button again and again, trying to advance the slide, trying to make it go away. "Why is this here? Turn it off." I stepped forward into the light. "Leave it on." "Arthur," I said into the microphone. Steinberg, who was controlling the laptop from the wings, nodded once. I walked over to the screen, using the shadow of my hand to point at the first column. "You said numbers do not lie, Terrence," I said calmly, addressing the crowd. "And you are right. They do not lie. So let us look at yours." I pointed to the top line. "Here we have the operating budget for your firm. Horizon Realty," I said. "As of this morning, the account balance is negative $3 million. The crowd murmured. Negative $3 million. I moved my hand down the list. "And here we have the expenditure column," I continued. "Let us see where the investors' money went. Did it go to land acquisition? Did it go to permits? No." I read the line item aloud, my voice ringing clear. Cold, June 14th. Wire transfer to Porsche Financial Services. $15,000. Labeled in the company books as marketing consultation. I turned to Terrence. "That is the lease payment on your car, son. You are driving a marketing consultation." Laughter, cruel and sharp, erupted from the back of the room. Terrence went pale, grabbing the podium for support. "That is a mistake," he stammered. "It is a clerical error." I ignored him. I moved my hand down to the next section. August 3rd. Wire transfer to the Diamond Vault. $25,000. Labeled as office supplies. I looked at Brittany, who was standing near the stairs clutching her purse. "Brittany," I said, "is that diamond tennis bracelet you are wearing considered an office supply? Does it help you staple papers faster?" Brittany covered her wrist, looking around wildly like a trapped animal. "It was a bonus," she shrieked. "I earned it." "You stole it," I corrected. "You took money from the escrow account. Money that belonged to families trying to buy their first homes, and you bought jewelry to wear to a party where you insulted the host." I pointed to the next line. This one was the most damaging. September 1st wire transfer to Dr. Stephen Miller Plastic Surgery Center. $12,000 labeled as structural repairs. The room exploded. The laughter was raucous now, uncontainable. Even Victoria Sterling, the Ice Queen herself, let out a snort of amusement. "Structural repairs," Mrs. Sterling whispered to David Chen, loud enough for me to hear. "Well, I suppose a nose job is technically structural." Brittany let out a wail, covering her face, her vanity shattered into a million pieces along with her reputation. Terrence was shaking his head, hitting the remote frantically, trying to kill the feed. "Stop it! Stop it!" he screamed. "You are ruining me. This is private financial data. You have no right to show this. I will sue you, Steinberg. I will sue you for breach of privacy." Steinberg stepped out from the wings, his face impassive. "Actually," Mr. Freeman Steinberg said, holding up a document. "As the majority shareholder of the parent company that insures Horizon Realty, your father has every right to audit the books. And since you used company funds to rent this venue, technically, this presentation is company property." I took a step closer to the screen. The laughter died down as I pointed to the final section at the bottom. The numbers here were not read, they were projected figures. "And this," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous growl, "this is the part that hurts the most." The screen showed a line item labeled, "Projected inflow, amount $45 million. Source sale of Freeman Estate to Omni Hotel. Group status. Pending signature of owner." I looked at the crowd. "My son is not just a thief," I said. He is a con artist. He stands here tonight in a tuxedo. He didn't pay for drinking wine. He didn't buy, trying to sell you shares in a resort he doesn't own. I pointed at the line item. He has been negotiating to sell this house, my house, to a hotel chain. He told the brokers that the owner was senile. He told them I was a vegetable in a nursing home. He was going to forge my signature tonight while I was cleaning the bathrooms to pay off his gambling debts and cover up his embezzlement. I turned to Terrence. "You were going to sell my home, Terrence," I asked softly. "The home I built with my own hands. The home where your mother's ashes are scattered in the garden. You were going to bulldoze it for a hotel just to save your own skin." Terrence looked at me, tears streaming down his face, stripped of all his defenses. "I had to." "Dad," he sobbed, "I had no choice. The auditors are coming on Tuesday. If I don't have the money, I am going to jail." I looked at him. I saw the fear. I saw the pathetic weakness of a man who had never been told no. "You had a choice," I said. "You could have worked. You could have saved. You could have asked for help, honestly, instead of trying to steal it. But you chose the easy way, and the easy way just leads you off a cliff." I turned back to the audience, to the billionaires and the investors. "You laughed at me earlier," I said. "You laughed because I drive a 1990 Ford truck. You laughed because I live in a small rental. You laughed because I hold a mop." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my wallet. I opened it, showing that it was empty of credit cards, empty of debt. "I drive a Ford because I own it." I said I live in a rental because I choose to. "But I do not owe a single cent to any man on this earth." I pointed at the screen, at the sea of red numbers. "My son drives a Ferrari, but the bank owns the steering wheel. He wears a Rolex, but the pawn shop owns the time. He lives in a penthouse, but the landlord owns the view. He owes $5 million, and tonight he tried to pay it with my legacy." I looked at David Chen. "Who is the poor man in this room, David?" I asked. David Chen stood up. He adjusted his jacket. He looked at Terrence with a look of absolute finality. "He is," David said quietly. "David Chen." Turned to his entourage. "I think we have seen enough, gentlemen," Chen said. "This man is not a risk. He is a liability. Remove him from my contact list immediately and cancel the meeting we had scheduled for Monday." Chen turned and walked toward the exit, not even looking at Terrence as he passed. Victoria Sterling stood up next. "Disgusting," she murmured, staring at Brittany. "You spent escrow money on a nose job. You are a disgrace to the industry. I am calling the licensing board in the morning. You will never sell a doghouse in this city again, let alone a mansion." She turned and followed Chen. It started a stampede. The hedge fund managers, the bankers, the social climbers, they all stood up, pulling out their phones, canceling checks, deleting numbers, putting distance between themselves and the toxic cloud. That was Terrence Freeman. "I am leaving," came a shout from the back. It was the broker Julian, the man Terrence had conspired with. "I didn't know anything about this. I was lied to." Julian ran for door like a rat fleeing a sinking ship. In 5 minutes the room was empty. The waiters were clearing the glasses. The music had stopped. Only 3 people remained on the dance floor. Me standing tall in my tuxedo, and Terrence and Brittany standing in the ruins of their life, watching the screen where the red numbers continued to glow, judging them. Terrence fell to his knees. "It is over," he whispered, staring at the floor. "It is all over." I looked down at him. I walked over to the podium and picked up the remote. I pressed the power button. The screen went black, plunging them back into the shadows. "It was over a long time ago, son," I said. "You just didn't read the balance sheet." The silence in the grand hall was not peaceful. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a battlefield after the cannons have stopped firing. The last of the guests had fled their luxury cars, peeling out of the driveway, leaving skid marks on my cobblestones. The waiters had retreated to the kitchen, sensing the violence in the air, and wisely choosing to stay out of the crossfire. The only thing left in the room was the wreckage. Broken crystal glasses lay scattered like diamonds in the rough puddles of vintage wine soaked into the Persian rugs like fresh blood, and the smell of expensive perfume turning sour, mixed with the sweat of desperation. I stood in the center of the room, adjusting my cuffs, looking at the 2 people who were supposed to be my legacy. Terrence and Brittany stood near the stage, surrounded by the debris of their social lives. They looked small. They looked broken. The arrogance that had fueled them for years had evaporated, leaving behind something much uglier and much more pathetic. I expected anger. I expected them to scream at me, to storm out, to blame me for ruining their night. But I underestimated the survival instincts of a parasite. When a parasite realizes its host is not dying, but is in fact stronger than ever, it does not let go. It digs in deeper. Brittany was the first to move. She wiped the tears from her face with the back of her hand, smearing her mascara into dark bruises under her eyes. She looked at me standing there in my tuxedo, looked at the power I radiated, and something clicked behind her eyes. It was a terrifying transformation. 1 second she was a weeping victim, the next she was a dawning realization. She smoothed her wine-stained dress. She forced her trembling lips into a smile that was shaky and terrified, but a smile nonetheless. "Dad," she whispered. The word hung in the air like a toxic cloud. She had never called me Dad. She had called me Bernard. She had called me the old man. She had called me, "Hey you," but never Dad. She took a step forward, navigating around a pile of broken glass. "Dad," she said, her voice gaining strength, pitching up into that sweet saccharine tone she used when she wanted something. "Is it really true? Do you really own all this?" I did not answer. I just watched her calculating the distance between us. Brittany let out a breathless laugh, shaking her head as if we had all just shared a wonderful inside joke. "Oh my God, Bernard," she giggled. Walking faster now. "You got us. You really got us." This was a test, wasn't it? It was just a big, elaborate test to see if we could handle the pressure. She reached me, and before I could step back, she threw herself at my feet. She didn't kneel. She collapsed, clutching my legs, hugging my knees, burying her face in the fabric of my custom trousers. "I am so sorry, Dad," she sobbed, her voice muffled against my leg. "I am so sorry. We were just stressed. The gala was so important, and we were just trying to be perfect. We didn't mean any of those things we said about you being a janitor. We were just joking. You know, our sense of humor, right? We were just trying to motivate you, trying to get you to play along with the theme." She looked up at me, her eyes wide and pleading, trying to summon tears that weren't there. "You are amazing, Dad," she gushed. "You are a genius, a secret billionaire. I always knew there was something special about you," I told Terrence. I said, "Your father has a spark." I said that, didn't I? "Terrence," I said, "Bernard is going to surprise us one day." I looked down at her, clinging to me like a barnacle. I felt a wave of nausea roll through my stomach. It was physical, visceral disgust. She was touching me with the same hands that had thrown my chocolate in the trash, the same hands that had slapped my face an hour ago. I tried to pull my leg away, but she held on tight. "We love you so much, Dad," Brittany continued, her nails digging into my leg. "We are family. And families fight, right? But we forgive each other. That is what we do. You forgive us, right? I mean, look at this. Look at place. We can be so happy here. You need us. Bernard, you need a woman's touch to run a house this big. I can organize the staff. I can plan the parties. We can be a team." She was already moving in. She was already measuring the drapes in her mind. I looked at Terrence. He was standing a few feet away, watching his wife grovel. He didn't look disgusted. He looked thoughtful. He was processing the numbers, the debt, the audit, the prison sentence. And then he looked at me. He didn't kneel. He was too proud for that. But he walked over his hands in his pockets, trying to adopt a casual posture, trying to act like we were just two men discussing the weather. "You know," Dad, Terrence said, his voice raspy. "She is right. You really played us." He shook his head, letting out a chuckle that sounded like dry leaves cracking. "Why didn't you tell me?" Terrence asked, a hint of accusation creeping into his tone. "Why the secret? Why let me humiliate myself asking for loans from sharks when you were sitting on $900 million? We are blood. Dad, you watched me struggle. You watched me drown in debt, and you just sat there in your rental house watching TV." Why, I looked at him. The audacity was breathtaking. "I watched you struggle," I asked quietly. "I paid for your education. Terrence, I bought your first house. I gave you every opportunity to succeed. You didn't struggle. You squandered." Terrence waved his hand, dismissing my words as if they were annoying flies. Okay, sure. I made some bad investments," Terrence said. "But that is business, Dad. You know, business. You are a tycoon, apparently. You know you have to spend money to make money. I was just taking risks. Just like you did with Tech Corp. He stepped closer, entering my personal space, smelling of stale scotch and fear. But look, it doesn't matter now, Terrence said, smiling a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The important thing is that we are okay. You are rich. I am your son. It stays in the family. He put a hand on my shoulder, squeezing it familiarly. So here, though, is the plan. Dad, Terrence said, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. The auditors are coming on Tuesday. It is a misunderstanding, really, just a cash flow issue. But if they see the negative balance, they will make a fuss. It could get messy, legal messy. And you don't want that, Dad. You don't want the Freeman name dragged through the mud just when you came out as a billionaire. It would hurt your stock prices. He paused, waiting for me to agree, waiting for me to panic about the reputation he had already destroyed. So Terrence continued, his eyes locking onto mine, intense and greedy. I need a bridge loan, just a small one. $5 million, I can wire it to the firm. Monday morning, clear the books and the auditors go away. Then we can sit down and restructure my portfolio. Maybe I can come work for you, manage the estate. I mean, I know real estate, Dad. I can help you. He squeezed my shoulder harder. And be honest, Dad, Terrence said, his voice dropping even lower. It is $5 million. It is pocket change to you. And it is going to be mine eventually anyway, right? I mean, I am your only son. When you go, it all comes to me. So really, you are just giving me an advance on my inheritance. It is my money. Just a little early. I stood there frozen. The world seemed to slow down. An advance on his inheritance. He was standing over the grave. I wasn't even in yet, counting the coins on my eyes. He was looking at his father, not as a human being, but as a walking ATM that was malfunctioning by not dispensing cash fast enough. He didn't care about the humiliation. He didn't care about the lies. He didn't care that he had tried to sell my home out from under me. All he cared about was that the bank was open and he wanted to make a withdrawal. Brittany sensed my hesitation and doubled down, squeezing my leg harder. Please, Daddy, she whined. Think of the scandal. If Terrence goes to jail, it will look so bad for you. You have to help him. You have to help us. We are your children. We are all you have. Who else is going to take care of you when you get really old? You don't want to be alone, do you? The threat was veiled but clear. Pay us or die alone. I looked at Brittany, looked at the fake tears tracking through her makeup. I looked at Terrence, looked at the entitlement etched into every line of his face. I felt a sudden clarity, a cold, sharp clarity that cut through the emotion. I reached up and removed Terrence's hand from my shoulder. I didn't shove him, I just lifted his hand by the wrist and dropped it like it was a dead fish. Then I looked down at Brittany. Get up, I said. My voice was not loud, it was not angry. It was the voice of a man who is done negotiating. Brittany blinked, confused by the lack of warmth. She slowly released my legs and stood up, smoothing her dress, trying to regain some dignity. But failing, I stepped back, creating a physical distance between us, a chasm that could never be crossed. You ask why I didn't tell you, I said, looking from one to the other. I didn't tell you because I wanted to see who you were when you thought I had nothing. I said, and you showed me. I walked over to the table where a bottle of champagne was still sitting in a bucket of melting ice. I pulled out the bottle, dripping water onto the marble floor. You treated the janitor like garbage, I said, turning back to them. You mocked his clothes, you mocked his car. You made him stand in a bathroom and hand you towels. You treated him as less than human because you thought he had no power. I poured a glass of champagne, watching the bubbles rise. And now that you know I have power, you love me. Now that you know I have money. I am suddenly daddy and a genius. I took a sip of the wine. It was crisp and cold. That is not love, I said, setting the glass down hard. That is prostitution. Brittany gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. How dare you, she whispered. And you, Terrence, I said, turning my gaze to my son. You think this money is yours? You think it is your birthright? You think you are entitled to $5 million to cover up your crimes because you share my last name? I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. You said it yourself tonight, son. You are a self-made man. You said you succeeded despite me. Well, congratulations. I reached into my tuxedo pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It wasn't a check. It was the receipt for the tuxedo Steinberg had brought. I am granting your wish. Terrence, I am letting you be self-made. I am not giving you $5 million. I am not giving you $5,000. I am not giving you 5 cents. Terrence's face turned a color I had never seen before, a mix of purple and gray, rage and terror warring for dominance. You can't do that, he screamed. You can't let me go to jail. I am your son. It is my money. It was never your money. I roared, my voice echoing off the walls. It was my sweat. It was my labor. It was my life. And as for my inheritance, I looked at them both with a finality that terrified them more than the police ever could. You are right, Terrence. I need to think about where my money goes when I die. And since I have seen how you treat the poor, I think I know exactly where it belongs, and it is not in your pocket. I turned to the shadows where Steinberg was waiting. Arthur, I said. Yes, sir. Steinberg stepped forward. Show them the door. Terrence lunged at me, his hands curled into claws, desperate, violent. You old bastard, he screamed. Give me the money. But he never reached me. Marcus, my head of security, stepped out from behind a pillar. He moved with a speed that belied his size. He intercepted Terrence, grabbing him by the back of his tuxedo jacket and jerking him backward off his feet. Terrence hit the floor hard, the wind knocked out of him. Brittany screamed, backing away. Get them out of here, Marcus, I said, turning my back on them. I have a meeting with my granddaughter in the morning, and I don't want the house to smell like trash. I walked toward the library, leaving them screaming, leaving them begging, leaving them to face the consequences they had bought and paid for. I didn't look back. I had wasted enough time on bad investments. The room was quiet now, except for the heavy breathing of my son and his wife, who stood before me like two criminals awaiting a sentence they knew they deserved, but could not comprehend. Steinberg stood to my right, a silent sentinel holding the leather briefcase that contained the architecture of their demise and the blueprint of a new future. I reached out, and Steinberg placed a manila folder in my hand. It was old, the edges soft and worn, the paper inside yellowed with the passage of time. I held it up so Terrence could see the label. It was handwritten in ink that had faded to a dull gray. Do you recognize this, Terrence? I asked, my voice echoing softly in the vast, empty hall. Terrence squinted, his eyes red from the alcohol and the tears of self-pity. He nodded slowly, a look of desperate recognition dawning on his face. That is your will, he whispered. His voice was hoarse, trembling with a sudden surge of hope. That is the will you showed me when I graduated college. You said it was all. You said it. Mine. Yes, I said, running my thumb over the cover. I drafted this 30 years ago, back when I still believed in potential, back when I looked at you and saw a future king instead of a court jester. This document states that upon my death, 100% of my estate, my stocks, my savings, and my property would transfer to you. Terrence Freeman, my only son. Brittany grabbed Terrence's arm, her nails digging into his tuxedo jacket. Her eyes lit up with that familiar predatory gleam. She saw a lifeline. She saw a chance that maybe, just maybe, I was a sentimental old fool who was about to forgive them. See, she hissed at him. He still loves you. He kept it. I looked at them. I looked at the greed that instantly replaced the shame on their faces. It was instinctive for them, like a shark smelling blood in the water. They didn't care about the insults. They didn't care about the fraud. They just cared about the paper in my hand. It leaves you everything. I continued looking at the document. It leaves you these TechCorp shares that are now worth $900 million. It leaves you this house. It leaves you the legacy of a lifetime. Terrence took a step forward, his hand reaching out instinctively. Dad, he choked out, I know I messed up. I know I hurt you, but we are blood. This is right. I can change. I can be the son you wanted. Just give me a chance to manage it. I looked at him deep in the eyes. I gave you a chance, Terrence, I said. I gave you 35 years of chances. I took the document in both hands. And tonight you proved that giving you money is like giving a loaded gun to a child. You don't use it to build, you use it to destroy. I ripped the folder in half. The sound was loud, a violent tearing noise that cut through the silence like a gunshot. No! Terrence screamed, lunging forward as if he could catch the sound in the air. No, don't! I ripped it again and again, turning the yellowed paper into confetti. The pieces fluttered down to the marble floor, landing on the wine stains, landing on the broken glass, landing on the ruins of his dignity. It is gone, Terrence, I said, dropping the last pieces. The old will is dead, just like the version of my son I thought existed. Brittany let out a wail, dropping to her knees and frantically trying to gather the pieces of paper as if she could tape them back together and salvage a fortune. "You crazy old man!" she shrieked, clutching the scraps. "You can't do this. That is legal tender. That is our money. It is trash." "Brittany," I said, stepping over her. "It is just trash now." I turned to Steinberg. The new file. Arthur Steinberg reached into his briefcase and pulled out a sleek blue folder. It was thick, crisp, and stamped with the official seal of the Freeman Trust. It looked heavy. It looked like iron. I took it and held it up. "This is the last will and testament of Bernard Freeman, dated and notarized this evening at 6 p.m. just before I put on that janitor's uniform." I opened the folder. The pages were white and clean, the ink black and sharp. "This document revokes all previous wills," I read aloud, my voice steady. "It places the entirety of my estate, including the Freeman Mansion, the Tech Corp portfolio, and all liquid assets into an irrevocable trust. The total value of the trust is approximately $950 million. Terrence was shaking his head back and forth, a pendulum of denial. "Who?" he whispered. "Who gets it? If not me, then who? You have no one else. Dad, you have no one." I looked past him toward the shadows of the grand staircase. "Maya," I called out. My granddaughter stepped out from the darkness where she had been watching. She was still wearing her pink dress, her face streaked with dried tears. She looked terrified, holding herself tight as if she were cold. "Come here, little bird," I said, softening my voice. Maya walked down the stairs, her steps hesitant. She looked at her father, who was staring at her with open-mouthed shock. She looked at her mother, who was still on the floor, clutching scraps of paper. She came to. "Stand beside me." I put my arm around her shoulders, feeling her tremble under the silk. "This is the beneficiary," I announced, looking at Terrence. "Maya." Terrence gasped. "But she is a child. She is 18. She doesn't know anything about money. She knows the value of a chocolate bar," I said sharply. "And more importantly, she knows the value of kindness." I looked down at the document, reading the terms. "The sole beneficiary of the Freeman Trust is Maya Freeman. The assets will be held in trust until she reaches the age of 25. At that time, she will receive full control of the estate to use for her art, for her life, for whatever she chooses." Maya looked up at me, her eyes wide. "Grandpa," she whispered, "you don't have to." "Hush, child," I said, smiling at her. "It is already done, but there is a condition," I said, raising my voice so Brittany could hear me from the floor. "There is a very specific clause in this trust. Section 4, paragraph 1, the anti-parasite clause." I looked directly at Brittany, who had stopped gathering paper and was now staring at Maya with a look of pure venom. "The condition is this," I read. "If at any time the beneficiary Maya Freeman provides any financial assistance to her parents, Terrence or Brittany Freeman, the trust is immediately dissolved and the entire fortune is donated to the National Janitorial Association." Terrence looked like he had been punched in the gut. What he choked out. "You heard me," I said. "You get nothing. And if you try to guilt her, if you try to manipulate her, if you try to beg her for a single dime, she loses everything." I closed the folder with a snap. "So if you want your daughter to be rich, Terrence, you will stay away from her money. You will never ask her for a loan. You will never ask her to pay your rent. You will never look at her as a bank account again." The cruelty of it hit them. The brilliance of it hit them. I hadn't just cut them off. I had built a wall around my granddaughter that they could never breach if they tried to bleed her dry. They would only destroy the very thing they coveted. Terrence fell silent, defeated by the logic, defeated by the absolute finality of it. But Brittany did not accept defeat. Brittany was a creature of impulse, and her impulse was rage. She looked at Maya. She didn't see a daughter. She saw a vault that she had been locked out of. She saw the 18-year-old girl she had bullied and controlled suddenly holding the keys to the kingdom while she was left in the dirt. "You little witch!" Brittany screamed, scrambling to her feet. The sound was feral, unhinged. "You planned this, didn't you?" Brittany shrieked, her face twisted into a mask of ugly hate. "You talked to him behind my back. You batted your eyelashes and played the sweet little artist while I did all the work." She lunged. She moved faster than I expected, fueled by the adrenaline of a woman who had lost everything. She flew at Maya, her hands curved into claws, reaching for the blue folder, reaching for Maya's hair, reaching to hurt the only person in the room who was innocent. Give it to me, Brittany screamed. Give me the paper. You don't deserve it. You are a stupid girl. You are nothing without me, Maya screamed, shrinking back behind me, terror flashing in her eyes. I tried to step in front of her, but I was 71 and Brittany was young and desperate. She grabbed Maya's arm, digging her nails in hard enough to draw blood. You ungrateful brat, Brittany yelled, shaking her. Give it to me. Get off her, I roared, raising my cane, but I didn't need to use it. A shadow moved across the stage, massive and fast. It was Marcus, my head of security. He didn't shout. He didn't hesitate. He moved with the kinetic efficiency of a wrecking ball. He intercepted Brittany mid-scream, gripping her by the waist and lifting her feet clear off the ground. Let me go, Brittany shrieked, kicking and thrashing her heels, scraping against Marcus's shins. Let me go. It is my money. It is mine. Marcus didn't even grunt. He walked her backward away from Maya, away from me, like he was carrying an unruly child. Control yourself, Marcus said, his voice deep and calm, or you will be restrained. He dropped her onto the floor near the exit, hard enough to knock the wind out of her. Brittany gasped, sprawling on the marble, her dress riding up her hair, a bird's nest of chaos. She looked up at us, chest heaving. You stole my life, she sobbed, pointing at Maya. You stole my life. I stepped forward, putting myself between her and my granddaughter. You stole your own life, Brittany, I said, my voice cold as ice. You stole it the moment you decided that money was more important than family. You stole it when you threw away a chocolate bar because it wasn't fancy enough. You stole it when you slapped a 71-year-old man for ruining a dress. I looked at Marcus. Get them out, I said. Marcus signaled to two other guards who stepped out from the wings. Take them to the curb, Marcus ordered, and call the police regarding the assault on the young lady. Terrence looked at me one last time. Dad, please, he whispered. I turned away. I looked at Maya, who was holding her arm where her mother had grabbed her. Are you okay, little bird? I asked. She nodded, wiping her eyes. I am okay, Grandpa, she said. I put my arm around her and walked her toward the library, away from the screaming woman and the broken man. The money is safe, I said to her. And now, so are you. The grand hall was quiet now, the kind of quiet that follows a hurricane when the winds have died down and all that is left is the wreckage. My son, Terrence, and his wife Brittany stood near the massive oak doors, their shoulders slumped, their spirits broken. They looked like refugees in their own lives, stripped of their dignity and their future. They turned to leave, eager to escape the burning gaze of the father they had underestimated, eager to get into their luxury car and drive away to lick their wounds in private. But I was not done. I stood at the base of the grand staircase, my hand resting on the polished banister. Steinberg stood to my left, holding the deed. Marcus stood to my right, a wall of muscle and loyalty. Halt, I said. The single word cracked through the air like a whip. Terrence froze his hand, hovering over the brass door handle. He turned back slowly. Fear etched into every line of his face. What now? Dad, he whispered. We are leaving. We are getting out. Just like you said. Walked toward them, the sound of my dress shoes clicking rhythmically on the marble floor. I stopped 5 feet away, looking them up and down, analyzing them like assets on a balance sheet. You are leaving. Yes, I said. My voice was devoid of warmth, devoid of anger. It was just business. But you are leaving with exactly what you brought into this relationship. Which is nothing, Terrence frowned, confusion warring with his panic. What do you mean, he asked. We're just going home. I pointed a finger at the shimmering Mercedes key fob clutched tightly in his sweaty hand. That car, I said. Terrence clutched the keys to his chest like a child holding a favorite toy. No, he said, backing up. No, you can't take the car. It is in my name. Is it? I asked calmly. Or is it in the name of a guarantor with an 80% credit score and a substantial portfolio, a guarantor named Bernard Freeman? I held out my hand, palm up. I co-signed the lease. Terrence, I paid the down payment because you said you needed a reliable vehicle for clients. And since you are currently unemployed and facing a criminal audit, I am revoking my guarantee. Steinberg has already contacted the dealership. The repo order is active, effective immediately. Terrence looked at the keys. He looked at the heavy silver fob with the three-pointed star, the symbol of the status he craved so desperately. "Give it to me," I said. He hesitated, his hand shaking. Marcus took a step forward, his boots thudding heavily. "Don't make him take it, Terrence," I warned. Terrence let out a sob, a broken sound of defeat. He dropped the keys into my open palm. The metal was warm from his grip. I closed my fingers around them, feeling the weight of his ego dissolve. "Marcus," I said, handing the keys to my head of security. "Have the car moved to the garage. It will make a nice runabout for the gardening staff." Terrence flinched as if I had slapped him. The gardening staff. It was the ultimate demotion. I turned my attention to Brittany. She was standing against the wall, her arms crossed over her chest, trying to hide the wine stain, trying to make herself small, but she could not hide the glitter of diamonds at her throat and on her wrists. "And you, Brittany," I said. She looked up, her eyes wide and terrified. "What?" she snapped, clutching her necklace. "This is mine. You can't have this." It was a gift from whom I asked, from the husband who stole from his company, or from the father-in-law who loaned you $50,000 last Christmas for a business venture that never existed. Brittany went pale. "I know about the boutique." "Brittany," I said, "I know you never opened it. I know you took the seed money I gave you, and you went to Tiffany and Company. You bought that necklace. You bought those earrings. You bought that tennis bracelet." I took a step closer, invading her personal space. "That is not jewelry," I said. "That is my money, wearing a costume. Take it off." Brittany shook her head, backing away until she hit the wood of the door. "No," she screamed, "you are a thief. You are robbing me. I am liquidating my assets," I corrected coldly. Steinberg stepped forward, checking a list on his clipboard. Item 1, diamond solitaire necklace, 3 carats, value $15,000. Item 2, platinum tennis bracelet, value $12,000. Item 3, diamond stud earrings, value $8,000, all purchased with funds traced directly to the Freeman Trust loan account. Steinberg looked up over his glasses. "Surrender the items, Mrs. Freeman, or we will add grand larceny to the list of charges the police are currently drafting." Brittany looked at Steinberg, then at Marcus, then at me. She saw no mercy. She saw only the cold, hard wall of consequence. With trembling hands, she reached up to her neck. She unclasped the heavy diamond necklace. It slid through her fingers like water pooling in her palm. She threw it at me. It hit my chest and fell to the floor. "Take it!" she shrieked. "Take it, you old miser. I hope you choke on it." The bracelet followed, clattering onto the marble. Then the earrings, painful to remove, ripped from her lobes in her haste. I motioned to Marcus. "Pick them up," I said. "They will go to the charity auction, the real one, not the sham my son organized." Now they stood there stripped bare. Terrence without his car, Brittany without her armor. They looked ordinary. They looked small. "Get out," I said, pointing to the door. Terrence pushed the heavy door open. The night air rushed in, cold and biting, carrying the scent of impending rain. They stepped out onto the front porch, shivering instantly in the chill. The wind whipped Brittany's hair across her face. The warmth of the mansion was gone, replaced by the harsh reality of the elements. They turned toward the driveway, expecting to see a taxi, expecting some final act of mercy. "There is no ride waiting," I called out from the doorway. Terrence turned back, his face pale in the moonlight. "What, you made me walk?" "Terrence," I said, leaning against the doorframe. "You made an old man walk a mile uphill in the dark because my truck was an eyesore. You made me use the service entrance." I pointed down the long, winding driveway, the same path I had trudged up hours ago. "Now you walk." "But it is freezing," Brittany wailed, clutching her bare arms. "It is a mile to the main road. We are in formal wear." "Then you better start moving," I said. "The blood flow will keep you warm." I signaled to Marcus. "Close the gate," I said. Marcus pressed a button on the wall panel. The massive iron gates at the end of the driveway began to swing shut, slowly, ominously. "You have about 15 minutes before the main gate locks automatically," I said, checking my watch. "If you don't make it, you will be stuck inside the perimeter with the guard dogs, and trust me, the dogs are not as patient as I am." "Run!" Terrence looked at the closing gate in the distance. He looked at his wife in her high heels. He realized the gravity of his situation. He didn't wait for her. He didn't offer her his jacket. He just turned and started to run, his tuxedo shoes slapping against the pavement, desperate to escape the trap he had built for himself. "Terrence, wait!" Brittany screamed, stumbling after him, losing one of her heels in the gravel. She kicked it off, running with one bare foot, limping, crying, screaming his name into the wind. "Terrence, wait for me!" But he didn't look back. He ran into the darkness, a coward to the end. I watched them go until they were just shadows in the moonlight, until their voices faded into the rustling of the oak trees. I turned to Marcus. "Lock it up, Marcus," I said. "Yes, sir," Marcus said, closing the heavy front doors with a final resonant thud. Click. The lock engaged. I was alone inside my fortress. I walked slowly through the silent hall, past the stage where I had revealed myself, past the screen that still glowed with the red numbers of their debt. I climbed the grand staircase, my hands sliding along the smooth wood. I walked into the master suite. The room was vast, filled with moonlight spilling through the floor-to-ceiling windows. I walked out onto the balcony. The air was crisp and cold. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the clean scent of the night. I looked down. Far below, at the bottom of the hill, I could see two tiny figures moving along the road. They were small, insignificant, struggling against the incline, struggling against the dark. I saw the headlights of a passing car sweep over them, illuminating them for a second. A man in a suit running, a woman in a torn dress limping behind him. The car didn't stop. It kept going, leaving them in the dust. I turned back to the room. On the small table by the window sat a bottle of 1982 Petrus, the wine Terrence had tried to serve me, the wine he had spilled on the floor. I poured myself a glass. The liquid was dark, rich, almost black in the moonlight. I walked back to the railing. I swirled the wine in the glass, watching the legs run down the side. I raised the glass to the empty night, to the stars, to the memory of the woman who had warned me about this day 30 years ago. "To you, Catherine," I whispered. And to the frame, I took a sip. The wine was complex, layers of fruit and earth and time. It tasted like victory. It tasted like peace. I looked down one last time. The figures were gone, swallowed by the shadows of the trees I had planted. They were walking down the hill, but I was finally standing on top of it. The morning sun hits the limestone walls of the Freeman estate differently when the house is finally clean, and I do not mean clean of dust. I mean clean of toxic energy, clean of lies, and clean of the heavy, suffocating weight of disappointment. It was 8 o'clock in the morning, the kind of crisp, golden morning that makes you glad to be alive to see it. I was sitting on the terrace overlooking the gardens, the infinity pool shimmering like a sheet of glass below me. The air smelled of jasmine and freshly ground coffee, a stark contrast to the smell of stale champagne and desperation that had filled the house just 12 hours ago. I was wearing my old, comfortable cardigan and a pair of loose linen trousers. The tuxedo was hanging in the closet, back in its bag where it belonged. I didn't need the armor anymore. The war was over. Across the table from me sat Maya. She looked different this morning. She had washed off the heavy makeup her mother had forced her to wear, revealing the fresh, freckled face of an 18-year-old girl. She was wearing a simple t-shirt and jeans, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. She looked like herself for the first time in years. She was sketching in a notebook, her hand moving rapidly across the paper, capturing the play of light on the water. Wallace, my head of staff, walked out onto the terrace carrying a silver tray. He placed a plate of fresh fruit and warm croissants in front of us, pouring coffee into my ceramic mug. "Good morning, Mr. Freeman," Wallace said, his voice warm. "Good morning, Miss Maya." Maya looked up from her sketchbook. She smiled, a genuine bright smile that crinkled the corners of her eyes. "Good morning, Wallace," she said. "Thank you for the breakfast. The fruit looks amazing." Wallace bowed slightly, a real smile touching his lips. "You are very welcome, Miss Maya." I watched the interaction closely. I watched the way she looked him in the eye. I watched the way she acknowledged his presence as a human being, not just a pair of floating hands serving her food. I waited for Wallace to leave before I spoke. "You know, Maya," I said, breaking the comfortable silence. She looked up, her pencil hovering over the paper. "What, Grandpa?" I pointed to the retreating figure of the butler. "That right there is why you are sitting at this table," I said. "That is why you are the heir to this estate and not your father." Maya frowned, slightly confused. "Because I said thank you," she asked. "Because you meant it," I said. I took a sip of my coffee, letting the warmth spread through my chest. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. "Listen to me, little bird," I said, my voice serious but gentle. "Your father and your mother, They think wealth is what you wear. They think it is the car you drive or the zip code you live in. They think class is something you can buy at a boutique on Fifth Avenue. I gestured around us at the $50 million view, but they are wrong. Money is just a magnifier. Maya, if you are a good person, money makes you a better person because you can do more good. But if you are a bad person, money just makes you a monster. It amplifies the rot. I picked up a strawberry looking at the perfect red fruit. Your mother stood at this gate yesterday and screamed at a security guard because she thought he was beneath her. Your father treated me like a servant because he thought I had no power. That is poverty, Maya. That is a poverty of spirit that no amount of bank transfers can ever fix. Maya looked down at her sketchbook, tracing the lines of the drawing. I was scared I would turn into them, she whispered. I was so scared. Grandpa, they were pushing me so hard to be like them, to marry rich, to forget about art. I thought maybe I was crazy for wanting something different. You are not crazy, I said. You are immune. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small black card. It was a debit card linked to a modest checking account. It wasn't the millions, not yet, but it was enough. This is for you, I said, sliding it across the glass table. Maya looked at it, hesitating. I don't need money, Grandpa, she said. This isn't for clothes, I said. This is for freedom. I spoke to the dean of admissions at Parsons this morning. The real me spoke to him, the shareholder, the donor. Your acceptance has been reinstated. You start in the fall. Tuition is paid. Housing is paid. Maya's hands flew to her mouth, tears welling up in her eyes. Grandpa, she gasped. But this card, I continued, tapping the plastic. This is for your supplies. This is for paint, for canvas, for charcoal. This is for your tools. I looked her dead in the eye. You are going to New York, Maya, and you are going to work. You are going to work harder than you ever have in your life. You are going to wake up early and go to sleep late. You are going to learn the value of labor just like I did, because the money in the trust fund, that is just a safety net. It is not a hammock. Maya reached out and took the card. Her fingers were trembling. I will work, Grandpa, she promised. I will make you proud. You already have, I said. I sat back in my chair watching her. She was no longer the scared little girl hiding in the hallway. She was an artist with a future. She was the legacy I had been trying to build for 40 years. I realized then that I hadn't failed as a father. I had just skipped a generation. The seed had lain dormant in Terrence, but it had bloomed in Maya. I thought about Terrence and Brittany. I wondered where they were this morning, waking up in a motel room or perhaps on a friend's couch, realizing that the bridge was burned, the Mercedes was gone, and the easy ride was over. I felt a twinge of sadness, the phantom pain of a limb that had been amputated. But mostly I felt relief. The toxicity was gone. The leech had been removed. I looked at the garden. The roses I had planted 20 years ago were in full bloom, vibrant red against the green leaves. They had survived storms, they had survived droughts, and they had survived neglect. But they were still standing strong and beautiful because the roots were deep. I stood up, walking over to the edge of the terrace. The city sprawled out below us, a grid of ambition and noise. But up here it was quiet. Maya stood up and came to stand beside me. She rested her head on my shoulder. What are you going to do now, Grandpa? She asked. I breathed in the clean air. I am going to garden, I said, smiling. I have some weeds that need pulling, and then I think I might go for a drive. The Shelby needs to stretch its legs. Can I come with you? She asked. I looked at her, at the hope and the love in her eyes, the real love, not the transaction kind. Always, I said. I put my arm around her and we stood there, 2 generations of Freemans watching the sun climb higher into the sky, burning away the fog, leaving only the truth. I am Bernard Freeman. I was a janitor. I am a billionaire. But most importantly, for the first time in a long time, I am a grandfather. And my house is finally a home. Moral lesson. True wealth is not loud. It whispers. Poverty is not a lack of money. It is a lack of character. My family saw a janitor and treated him like trash, proving that their class was only skin deep. When you judge someone by their shoes, you miss the path they walked to get there. Never let disrespect slide just because it comes from blood. Sometimes you have to be the villain in their story to be the hero in your own piece. Build your empire in silence and let your success make the noise. If you enjoyed this story of justice and karma, please please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps us share more stories like this with the world. Turn on notifications so you never miss a beat. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had to cut off a toxic family member to save your own peace? I read every single one. Until next time, keep your head up and your circle small. Stay safe.